Okay, let's go ahead and get started here this morning. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Nick Place, and I have the honor and privilege of serving as a dean of the College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences at the University of Georgia. And it brings me great pleasure to welcome you to our Georgia Ag Forecast for 2026. And it's really an honor to welcome you to this annual event that we like to put on each year. And we've been doing a lot of those here in Tifton the last several years. So the Ag Forecast is a very important part of what we do in the College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences. And our dedicated researchers seek to understand trends and projects in the market and to provide up-to-date information for the agriculture community here in our great state of Georgia. With so many different friends in attendance today, from producers and industry partners to legislators, community members, other educational institutions, our hope is that this information that you pick up today will be very helpful in thinking about your plans for the next year in your operations, in the way that you approach policy decisions, and your plans for borrowing and lending in your work out in your farms and communities. Before we move forward, I want to take an opportunity to thank some of our sponsors for this event. The 2026 Georgia Ag Forecast is presented by Massey Ferguson, and we greatly are very grateful for their intentional partnership. And additional sponsors include Georgia Department of Agriculture and Georgia Grown, and we got a good number of those folks here. And CAS Alumni Association, the Farm Credit Associations of Georgia, and Corteva AgriScience, among others. So would you join me in thanking all those sponsors that we have? I want to take just a couple moments to tell you about where our college has been over the last year since we were here. And with our three-part mission of teaching that next generation, conducting groundbreaking research, and then relaying that research in our communities through cooperative extension, there's always quite a bit to share. So this past fall, our college continues to grow in both size and momentum. And in fall of 25, we enrolled just about 2,300 students, including over 1,500 undergrads and about 760 graduate students. That growth is showing up very well. So our credit hour production for year 25 increased 2.5% over 2024, and then up 12% from 2023. So that shows that we're really making some progress there on our goals of having 2,000 undergrads and 1,000 grad students over these next few years. We're also seeing exciting trends where students are choosing to focus their studies. Over the past 2 years, some of the fastest growing majors include regenerative biosciences, that's in our animal dairy science department, and that's grown by more than 160%. Animal biosciences is up 16%, and our turf grass management program is also going up. And much of that progress reflects a successful emphasis on our graduate student recruitment this past year. And looking ahead, we're going to build on that momentum with a renewed focus on strengthening on-campus undergraduate recruitment, as well as continued growth across the college. Our momentum is also reflected in the depth of longevity of our research programs. On November 1st, the UGA Department of Entomology marked its 75th anniversary, a milestone that celebrates decades of pioneering research, outstanding teaching, and meaningful extension work. The celebration honored the legacy of 9 emeritus professors who helped shape the department's national and international reputation. And I'd point out that department is in the top 5 in the country of entomology departments. Their contributions continue to influence how we train students, address agriculture challenges, and serve communities across our great state. We're also seeing innovation take shape through cutting-edge research in precision agriculture. For example, the precision ag work at UGA has increased significantly over the last year. The university continues to invest heavily in this area. Our teams are working with farms of all sizes to develop and implement integrated precision agriculture tools. And these projects encompass all areas of ag production, from animal health to plant science and beyond. And for example, Dr. Luan Oliveira and his team are working with weeding and spraying robots, as well as their award-winning drone dock, and that's a tongue twister, and which is a fully automated refueling and reloading station for large spray drones. And earlier this year, the drone dock earned the Grand Prize Innovation Award for Farm Robotics Challenge. And the drone dock is designed to automate the calculation, the dosing, and mixing of pesticides through a mobile app and has the potential to significantly reduce demands, improve accuracy, lower chemical use, reduce human exposure, and all this should deliver benefits for producers or workers and the environment alike. So finally, I want to take a moment to draw your attention to the cards that are at your table. There's a couple of them that look like this. And most of you will already be familiar with the Georgia Ag Impact Report. So we started doing something a little bit different last year. And this is a digital resource we launched in last year's Ag Forecast event. And we've gotten a lot of really good feedback on that. So I'd encourage you to click on that QR code when you have a chance. And there's a tremendous amount of data and information there for producers, legislators, for teachers, and others. And this is a very much an interactive county and commodity specific data, and really gives you a lot of very good information there that you can use. And then there's also this pamphlet that provides an overall view of ag forecast, some of the things that you're going to be hearing today. So I'd also say that in our college it's difficult to encompass our impact with the limited time I have. So these are just a couple of examples of some things that have happened since we were here last time. And if you're looking for more, I'd encourage you to visit our website and our CAS field report, which is the online news hub, and they'll give you an opportunity to keep up with the things that we have going on. So back to why we were here. So today is all about the outlook for Georgia agriculture over this next year, and we're in a very interesting time right now for sure. And we thank you for joining us here to hear more about what's to come in our industry and help you prepare as producers, lenders, and others. To begin, we're going to have a moderated panel with some leaders in agriculture and policy. And I'd ask our three panel members if you'd make your way up here to these three seats that we have. So Duncan, Russ, okay, you guys come on up. And when they get up here, I'll introduce them and have them talk a little bit more about their roles and operations and so on. Let me also just point out that after our panel, we'll be doing Farmer of the Year announcement. They'll be taking a break, and then we have a couple of speakers to look at our ag commodities as well as ag forecast. Then we'll be doing a lunch, and then right at the tail end of lunch, Commissioner Harper will be doing our closing talk here today, and we'll have you out right after that. About 1 o'clock, I think, is our plan to conclude. So you guys have a seat. Those mics should be on for you.
Bean, you know, it's always dangerous to give me a live mic.
I know I might need to go grab it. So joining us today is Duncan Johnson, who's our state FSA director. So Duncan, appreciate you being here. Russ Goodman, I'm sure everybody knows Russ, chairman of our Senate Ag Committee, and also blueberry farmer, and also singer that I've come to find out. And also right next to me is Ken Hamilton, our last year's Sunbelt Ag Expo Farmer of the Year winner. And I think that deserves a round of applause right there. And I'm also owner of Southern Valley Produce. So what we have planned is I have some general questions for the three of them. I'm going to ask a couple of those, and then I have some specific questions for each of them. There also are some white note cards on your table. If you have a question, I encourage you to jot that down and then wave that, and then Regina and probably others will come around and pick those up, and then I'll be having an opportunity to ask those questions as well. So I want to give you a chance to ask questions, some good, tough questions, I'm sure. So to get us started, I think we'll start with this question. Actually, let's have each of you talk about yourself and your operations and what you do. So Duncan, we'll start with you. I've almost forgot.
It'll be the shortest one. I'm Duncan Johnson. I actually grew up in the automobile business, spent the last 20 years being a franchise car dealer, and sold out and was asked to consider this because of my business experience and by the transition team, and they brought me into this position. I'm honored to be here. I'm the least qualified agriculture person up here. But the car business, once I realized, they tell me how many you're going to have to buy from them, how much you're going to pay them for, and how much you can sell them for. Not a whole lot of different than farming. But then I've also laughed. All the car dealers I talk to are happy to be compared to farming. I hadn't met a farmer yet happy to be compared to a car dealer. But I'm glad to be here, and thank you for having me, Dan.
Good deal.
My turn.
It is.
Well, thank you all for being here, and thank you, Dean, for inviting me. My name is Russ Goodman. I actually grew up, I'm a Tiff County boy originally, out in Brookfield. I grew up on a peanut, cotton, and tobacco farm. Went to school at the University of Georgia, majored in ag economics, and met my wife the first week I was there, and ended up, we got married the summer after we graduated and moved to Cogdale, and a blueberry farmer. We're in the timber business, and we also have the Great American Cobbler Company. So I've got one son at the University of Georgia, and I've got one that just got accepted. That's headed to that, under your tutelage, Mr. Dean.
Awesome.
And so I would just encourage y'all to go to Publix or Walmart or Food Line and buy one, because I need the help. Just wrote that tuition check last month. But anyway, I've always been involved, been passionate about agriculture, involved in agriculture. You know, graduated from college, and I was, you know, president of Young Farmers and president of the County Farm Bureau, and just had always on the board of the Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association. And you know, I guess it just over the years, as I continued to work in that space, the opportunity came up to run for the state senate, and it was really a trip to Washington that really, I'm not one of those guys that have that innate self-confidence like some people do, but it was a trip to Washington, D.C. when USMCA or NAFTA was being renegotiated, that some questions were asked, and I was kind of floored by the questions, because I saw at that point that we needed more folks that understood agriculture in positions, and that was I guess the catalyst that finally made me decide to run. And so was elected in 2020. My first term, I served as a floor leader for the governor, and in my second term, thanks to Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones and the members of the Committee on Assignment, I was able to really get my dream job, the only job I ever really, I mean, it's something that was kind of hard to imagine as a kid growing up on the farm in the 80s, to be able to serve as the chairman of the Senate Ag Committee. And so been doing that now in my fourth year. And so thankful to be here.
Good deal. Thanks, brother.
Okay.
Thanks, Senator, I should say.
Yes, I'm Kent Hamilton. I'm a vegetable grower from Colquitt County, and thank you, Dean, for having us. I'm honored to be able to try to contribute today. We are a year-round vegetable operation. We grow in our home base is here in South Georgia. We have operation up in Eastern Tennessee and operation in South Florida. We had a farm, or still have a farm, down in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, where we started producing back in 2003, and we're in the process of transitioning from there back to South Florida to produce. So we are, as I said, we are a year-round vegetable operation. A lot of things that affect us in agriculture are a little different than row crop growers, but still it's farming is farming. But I'm just glad to be here. Thank y'all for having us.
Thank you very much. All right, so let's jump in with our first general question here. In light of the potential weather that's coming our way, I think the first question I want to hone in on has to do with weather effects. So we are facing ice storms and hurricanes and freezes and drought and all kinds of other extreme events. What kind of changes would you say are needed in policy or programming, research, or operational changes to make our ag sector more resilient here in Georgia? Who wants to take first? Go ahead.
You want me to?
Go ahead,
Um,
Sandra.
I would say one thing that we could do is make improvements to crop insurance. You know, unfortunately, you know, extreme weather is becoming more, uh, more frequent, I think, than it was when I was a kid. And of course, you know, there's a lot of debate that goes on why that is, but I think that if anybody tries to tell you that weather's not getting more extreme, then they've got their head in the sand, you know, especially with late freezes and things like that with what we do with blueberries, but also with these hurricanes and everything else. They seem to, of course, we know weather's cyclical, but I think that with crop insurance, you know, we can do more so that when these weather events that do happen, you know, we all know how crop insurance works, and thankfully, you know, you can buy the hurricane policies and things like that, but also, you know, when you have these freezes, how that affects your 7-year average, and so I would like to see more. You know, I'm not sure that a farmer needs to be penalized for an act of God. You know what I mean? And so I don't know how we can go about doing that, but that safety net is vitally important to farmers.
Yeah, and I would agree on that. Kind of to piggyback on what Russ says, the insurance program is something that's very important. However, in the business that I'm in, growing fresh fruits and vegetables, we need to be careful and make sure that we don't develop an insurance program that becomes the primary revenue stream for growers. Because when you do that, then that adversely affects other growers that are trying to produce, trying to be smart about their production. You know, when they're planting during the year, make sure they're planting in the window that they need to be planting in, when they can get good yields, and not farming just for the insurance money. But there does need to be a safety net. That's a very important point. And the whole farm, the whole, what is it, the insurance that you can get that guarantees you so much, whole farm insurance. We haven't been participating in that, but I'm learning more about that, and that's something with the cost of production now, that's something that we're definitely going to be looking more at, to guarantee a revenue, a reasonable revenue source for our farming operation.
FSA being more of a support group in this, our job is to act quickly to help you. And when you go through a catastrophic event, you certainly want to do the duty that lies nearest. You got to get out of your driveway. So worrying about getting to the government agency right after it happens doesn't need to be a pressing issue, but we need to be available quickly and need to be able to provide the assistance that comes down for these programs. And that starts with you being ahead, making sure you're doing your acreage reporting, making sure that you do all of your stuff that we need to know, because when we have the data preloaded and in there, we can operate quicker to provide that assistance. So getting prepared for that weather, just make sure you've put in all your crop reports and everything else so that we can hurry up, because when they're waiting on data, as y'all know, the government is not quick processing data. They're getting quicker, and I'm proud to have seen just in my 8 months how quick they've gotten. It's still very slow compared to the real world, but they're getting better, and that starts with you providing the information that we need so that we can get that assistance to you in a hurry.
Good deal. All right, one more general question. So input costs in global markets and supply chain disruptions continue to pressure producers, as we all are well aware. So what tools or strategies do each of you believe are most effective for stabilizing our farm income? Who wants to go first?
Well, production cost has been a big thing for us, especially since COVID. our production costs has just gone through the roof. Labor is our biggest cost, and we participate in the H2A program where we're bringing in workers and housing those workers and working them for a certain length of time and then sending them back home. And to me, that's a win-win program for everybody. The United States government knows who these people are that are in our country. They do background checks on them. So it's not like we have a bunch of people wandering around in our country and nobody knows who they are. That's been a very good program for us. And it's come to be a very expensive program. We started with the program in '98, and our H2A wage, that what they call the adverse effect wage rate, was $6.30. And through this past year, our effective wage rate was $16.08. And that's just not sustainable. It's called the adverse effect wage rate to not adversely affect U.S. workers, but it has definitely adversely affect U.S. growers just because of the cost of it. Now we have got a reprieve. The Trump administration has changed the way they're calculating those wages, and we have got some reduction in our wages. So that has been a very good thing for us. But the cost of production has just skyrocketed over the last few years.
Dean, when I was at UGA, Joe Broder and Bob Schulstead and Jeff Dorfman, they taught us about something called comparative advantage. And comparative advantage means if another country can produce something inherently that either geographically or natural resources that they can produce something cheaper than we can buy those goods from them, and then you have more disposable income in this country to be able to lift the economy. Well, when that advantage, that comparative advantage that another country has is due to government regulation in the United States, that's not a real competitive advantage. And so when we talk about leveling the playing field for the American farmer, what Kent was talking about, in 3 years, we had a 31% increase in the H2A wage rate. That was $250 million a year to Georgia farmers alone. Now, keep in mind, we're competing with countries that, pay 10, 15% of that, right? And when you look at a produce farm, what do you think? Labor's 40% of your cost, Kent? Something like that. Yeah. And so you would look at things like the Tier 4 engines emissions mandate. We're competing against Brazil with cotton. And my understanding is that John Deere's still shipping Tier 3 basket cotton pickers to Brazil. But in the United States, we have to have a Tier 4 engine, and the only Tier 4 engine is in the basket cotton picker. I mean, in the roller cotton picker that is $1.2 million now. And so, I tell people this a lot. I believe in our country, and I'm not making this political but I think that we have hypocritical policies in our country. Because we say that we care about emission standards, and we say that we care about labor standards, and we say we care about environmental standards, and we impose these regulations on the American farmer. But at the same time, we allow products that are not grown under those same set of standards into our country. And a country that cannot, I'm gonna quote Austin Scott. He said, a country that can't feed itself doesn't know what freedom is. And so that is one of the things, if you give the American farmer a level playing field, he'll outcompete the world every day. But we've got to do that. And in terms of and I want to thank the Trump administration, that's $250 million a year that is staying in the state of Georgia. And, the frequency of the dollar, it turns over 7 times. I mean, you're talking about real money. And we're still working on the Tier 4 engines emissions mandate. To put it in perspective, a semi that runs 150,000 miles a year on the interstate is under the same emissions regulation as that pump that I've got at my farm that we use to frost protect with, that on average doesn't run but about 80 hours a year. That's insane. because, we use drip irrigation for everything else and we just use it for frost protection. I also want to talk about the supply chain stuff. That's something that I'm really concerned about because so much of the raw materials that we get, that we use for our plant protection products are coming from countries like China. And then you've got ammonium nitrate that, Russia supplies about 67.11% of the world's ammonium nitrate. And so when we talk about, being sure that we can feed ourselves, we've got to make sure that the American farmer has the tools that they've got to have to be able to grow those crops. And I'm hoping that, I think we're seeing some of this stuff being brought back into this country, but, the farmer can't produce the food if we don't have the plant protection products and the fertilizers that we need to grow those crops.
Mm-hmm. And you've been a big champion about moving that forward, so I appreciate that, Senator. Thank you very much. Duncan?
I'm just glad to be the support staff on this. I was sitting here looking at Senator Goodman's watch. He's got taking care of business on there. Elvis's emblem. And
Thank you very much.
I'm thankful to have folks like Senator Goodman who are pushing those issues and bringing that to the administration. They have their ears open and are listening. And from my position, we're just excited to help administer those things to come in and try to help level the playing field, because that's exactly what we want. I've never met a farmer that wanted a welfare program. They just wanted a chance. And this administration is working real hard to do that. So we're happy to support that.
Yeah, I think there's widespread support for that statement, Duncan, for sure. Absolutely. Every producer I know would say the same thing. Okay, let's move into some individual questions. But before I ask, if you have any cards you're jotting questions on, please hold those up. And so we got one over here, Regina. So, and I've got another one over here. All right, so I'm going to ask a couple of these individual questions, then we'll get to those. I'm going to start here with you, Kent, and work my way down. So your operation, Kent, spans multiple states and crops. So what innovations or technologies have made the biggest difference in efficiency and profitability for your operation?
One of the big things about our operation, up till a few years ago, we really didn't have a good handle on what it cost us to produce a crop. We knew what the seed cost, we knew what the land rent costs, we knew what the fertilizer and chemicals cost, but we really didn't have a good handle on all the other costs, all the overhead costs that goes into production that we got to figure. Because whenever we produce a crop, we not only have the raw cost in that crop, there's a lot of other costs that goes into that allows us to do what we do, to plant a crop, to be able to grow that crop, and to be able to harvest that crop. And so really looking at what we do and knowing what we've got in the crop has been very important for us. We've actually scaled back over the last few years. We've cut our production probably by 40%, I would say, on a year-round basis, and that's pretty tremendous. But we had to cut out some areas where we were selling, some customers that we were selling to, some markets that we were selling into that simply wasn't profitable with our cost of production. So knowing those things has been very important to us, and also looking at alternative ways to grow. I started farming back in the late 80s, and in 1990 we started farming on plastic and drip. And at that time we were fumigating with methyl bromide. Well, it was determined that methyl bromide was an ozone depleter, so it was banned from the marketplace. And at that time, growers really didn't have a replacement for that. Now, Stanley Culpepper and our extension service has been very instrumental in finding new ways to replace methyl bromide. But we have continued to look in other areas, and there was some replacement for methyl bromide, and a lot of those are still being used today. But we've gone to look at more biological ways and putting less harmful chemical products in our soil, fumigants and whatnot, and going to using more biological type things that promote beneficial nematodes in the soil, but that are harmful to parasitic nematodes in the soil. Those type things. We're not organic growers, but we are trying to farm more sustainably, trying to find new ways to produce the crops that we're producing, and trying to reduce our amount of input into those crops.
Very good. And I've heard a number of producers this past year really cut back on production and just leaving land fallow right now because of the very things you mentioned. So appreciate that, Kent. All right, Senator Goodman, question for you. So Georgia's been losing farmland for decades. So it's something you and I talked about earlier this morning. So what state level policies do you believe are most urgent to preserve working farmland while still allowing for economic growth here in the state?
Well, let me first off saying that the best thing that we can do to preserve farmland is to have an economic environment in which the American farmer is profitable. That is the number one thing. But on the state level, my roommate, Senator Sam Watson, had a bill last year. It's going to be on the ballot this November. It's a constitutional amendment. It's raising the CUVA acres from 2,000 to 4,000 acres. I think that's something that we need to do. I would encourage everybody to vote for that. That's conservation use. I'm sure everybody here knows what that is. But at any rate, because of the cost of equipment, and some of that comes back to government regulation, in order to, farms are getting larger. You can't go buy a $1.2 million cotton picker and farm 300 acres with it and pay for it, and so that's one of the things we've done. Another thing we did that was an initiative of Tyler Harper's, and I carried it on his behalf in the Senate, and Robert Dickey, my counterpart in the House, carried it on his behalf in the House. But it was a Georgia Farmland Conservation Act. And what we did was we created a PACE program, which stands for Purchase Agricultural Conservation Easement Program. There are already, I believe, 28 states in the country that had these. In Florida, they've already protected about 60,000 acres with that program. In North Carolina, they've protected about 28,000 acres. And so we've lost 20% of our farmland in the state of Georgia since 1974. That's hard to imagine when you think about that. But I will say this, because you see, a lot of things on social media. The overwhelming great majority of that is not lost because of solar panels. I mean, I think, we've got nearly 38 million acres of land in this state, and last I heard, there's about 38,000 acres of solar panels. We're losing farmland to rooftops. And so I think this program, you'll be able to sell. Of course, that land will have to stay in agricultural production in perpetuity. The good thing about this is there is a dollar for dollar matching grant from anything that the state puts in, the federal government, or anything that the state or private foundations put in is matched dollar for dollar. And so last I knew, Duncan, there's like $480 million, I think, that USDA pledges to that program. So that's one of the things that we've done on the state level. And we had a Senate study committee that Billy Hickman chaired that I served on. And another thing is that came out of that study committee is we're trying to develop policies in terms of generational transfers of farms, so that the tax burden isn't so overbearing that farm ends up getting broken up and not transferred to the next generation, because the average age of a farmer today is 58 years old. What would we say as a country if that statistic was true for doctors or school teachers? Think about that. And so we've got to get the next generation of farmers to let them know that not only that their government, but that their country has their back. And so that's one of the things that I tell people with my kids growing up, on the farm, and they see some of these policies that aren't unfair. I mean, I'm sorry, that are unfair, to the American farmer. And, what are we telling the next generation, And so there again, the best thing that we can do to protect farmland is help the American farmer be able to sell the products that they grow and make a profit, and level the playing field for the American farmer.
So one other policy question you and I were talking about, I'd like you to touch on with this group, and that has to do with balancing environmental regulation with the needs of our producers on pesticides, fertilizers, irrigation. I know that's something else that you're passionate about.
Yes, sir. I'm going to get started on this, and if you tell me to hush, I'm going to hush, okay?
I need to shut off your mic. Right?
Yeah, I'm pretty passionate about this. We had a bill last session, Senate Bill 144, and it was a fight. Now it costs about $300 million and takes about 13 years to get a plant protection product labeled in the United States. Now, my grandmother, who grew up on a farm about 15 miles from here, was born in 1923. The average life expectancy was about 53 or 58 years old, I can't remember. And the American farmer fed about 12 people a year. And today, the average life expectancy is 77 years old, and the American farmer feeds 169 people a year. Without plant protection products, this country would starve. That's just a fact. If you want to go back and look, the only way that we live in a world without plant protection products, the only way, is you go back to a world like it was in 1880 when 90% of the people lived on farms. The plant protection products and modern agriculture is what enabled all the people in the last 100 years to move from the farms and go, live in the suburbs and everything else. Well, there was a study that was done by an organization called IRAC. IRAC is a subsidiary of the World Health Organization. Now, there have been 1,500 studies and over 50 years worth of research that says these plant protection products are safe, okay? Well, there was a study done by IRAC, and the data that they used, let's just say they didn't use a broad spectrum of data. Let me put that away. And they came up with a whole list of compounds that they said could be possibly carcinogenic. Now, on that list is glyphosate. On that list is all of your organophosphate insecticides, malathion and diazinon. On that list is all your pyrethroids. Think about that. Think about mosquitoes and how many diseases mosquitoes carry and how we treat for mosquitoes. And these on that list was Captan, fungicides like Captan. On that list was also red meat, hot coffee, night shift work, hydrochloride that's in Advil and Tylenol. How many children would die from high fevers if we didn't have Advil and Tylenol? You know what else is on that list? Acrylamide. Acrylamide is a natural gas that is formed during high temp cooking, roasting, and baking processes that could possibly be carcinogenic. And it all started in California, of all places, lawsuits, okay? Bayer, who is the last manufacturer of glyphosate in the United States, has been sued 177,000 times and had $17 billion worth of judgments. Not one case, they've only won about 20% of the cases. They've not won one case proving that glyphosate made anybody sick. What they've won the cases on is based on the failure to warn doctrine. Now, under FIFRA, under federal law, the EPA determines what goes on the label, okay? The previous administration, when these lawsuits started, the EPA, in my understanding, did not go and defend their own science as they should have. And then so the company made a decision, well, we're going to settle the cases and then put a warning label on the box. And then they wouldn't let them put a warning label on the box because they said it's safe. Okay? So, by the way, not one Chinese company has been sued. Not one. So when we talk about the products that we've got to have to be able to feed this country, think about that now. The last domestic manufacturer of glyphosate, not one Chinese company has been sued. So we had a bill, Senate Bill 144. All the bill said was that so long as a company is abiding by the regulations and the label that the EPA approves to put on the label, that they cannot be held liable for failure to warn. You can still sue if you think it made you sick. You can still sue if you think you bought adulterated products. There's multiple avenues to be able to use the justice system, the judicial system, and if you think you've been injured or harmed, okay? They, and y'all, it turned into it turned into a heck of a tussle now. It bothers me. I went to a Republican Party meeting in Ware County, and I had a lady tell me that she wanted to ban all fungicides, herbicides, and insecticides. And I just looked at her and said, well, you just want to starve them. That's what you want to do, you know? I ended up I want to thank the University of Georgia, and I want to especially thank Stanley Culpepper. This gets back to the issue of what I'm talking about as far as there's so many people that don't understand what it takes to produce the food today. Stanley Culpepper came up. I had him come up, and he spoke to both the Democratic caucus and the Republican caucus to try to, explain the issue. Sonny Perdue has a former governor, former Secretary of Agriculture, wrote a letter in support of the legislation and how important our plant protection products were. And we were able finally to get it passed out of the Senate. We passed it with 44 votes, bipartisan support. And then it went to the House, and the American Trial Lawyers Association hired a lobbyist to try to kill the bill. And it didn't work. And we ended up getting it passed in the House, and the governor signed it into law. We were the first state in the country to pass it. North Dakota has passed it as well. And so I've started talking with other ag chairmen across the country. And it's been an interesting endeavor. I can tell you how blessed we are in this state to have a governor, a speaker, and a lieutenant governor that support and understand agriculture. But this narrative out there, that farmers are trying to, poison the world and everything. Do we want to go back to a world without modern agriculture and modern medicine, for that matter? I'm thankful, and I will tell you this: I took a lot of hate out of it, stuff on social media and everything else. And I just told them, I'll go to the House, but while I'm up there, I'm gonna fight for a farmer, and I'm gonna fight for our ability for this country to be able to feed itself. And without these plant protection products, we can't. That is the honest to God's truth. And what'll happen is if we'll just end up being completely dependent upon other countries for all of the products. Because if you look at the compounds that they're using, and by the way, that Iraq study is the only study in the history of humanity that came up with these compounds. And the World Health Organization ended up discrediting the report themselves. But that spawned all these lawsuits. That is, and that gets back to the point about, making sure that you elect people, because when we get to talking about, the 2% of the people that are feeding and clothing the country and the other 98% that aren't, well, let me tell you something. There's a lot of that 98% that's serving in city councils and on county commissions and in the state legislature and in the U.S. Congress. And I'll finish this by saying this: farmers have got to be more involved in going up there and having your voices heard. When my son was interning with the Georgia Agribusiness Council, and he was in the gallery when we were, had that bill on the floor. And I can tell you, he got to hear some of the conversations of people in that gallery talking about his daddy, And of course, he had the good sense just to keep his mouth shut, But those folks that don't understand what we do, they're there. And when we were debating that bill, something that is so important not only to our industry, but to our ability to be able to feed ourselves, there wasn't one farmer there. Not one. Now, Farm Bureau was there, Agribusiness Council was there. But And that's partly my fault. Because if I ever have something like that come up again, we're gonna have a bus that's gonna come out here and put about 40 farmers on it and get y'all to come up here and help those of us, because there's about 10 of us in the Georgia General Assembly that farm for a living. So sometimes we need some help. But that is something that I want to thank you for all the work that you did, because let's be honest with ourselves, there is no need to even have a school of agriculture if we don't have any plant protection products. I mean, that was the biggest fight that I've had since we've been there. Goes back to, having people that understand what it takes to produce the food that country depends on.
Oh, Senator Goodman, I knew I'd strike a chord with that particular question, but let me also just say thank you for the fight that you're putting on there in Atlanta each and every day that you're up there to stand up for Georgia agriculture. So thank you very much for that.
I want to add one thing to this. I want to thank the Trump administration for asking the Supreme Court to hear this case. And hopefully we're going to finally put an end to it. And sincerely, and I hope you'll pass that up the line.
Absolutely.
And that really meant a lot to me, because I took some hate from the far left, but I took a lot of hate from the far right too. I'm gonna be honest with you. And for this administration to stand with me and those in Atlanta that are fighting for farmers and stand with the farmers of this country, I greatly appreciate that.
Okay, Duncan.
Dean, before you get to my question, and I would say I'd yield my time back to Senator Goodman. But I will say this to echo what the senator is saying. Farming culture, everybody puts their head down and gets the job done. You just figure out what to do. And it's this, I can handle this. I'll just deal with what comes. Showing up to express what you're dealing with, to tell people, really makes a difference. It is important to show up and be there and to support Senator Goodman and all of the others. And I will tell you, they're working very hard. I talk with their offices. I talk with them a lot, that we send everything we can up to DC. But speak up, be there, because the people that are not supporting farming are there every day. And so please help him. And I want to echo that and thank you for fighting so hard. He's passionate when you can see the blood rise up in his face when he starts answering the question. So thank you, Senator Goodman.
Yeah, and
When you
too,
got-
Nick,
Go ahead.
if I could just say, reiterate what Russ says, as a vegetable grower, excuse me, we grow some organic crops, and we can farm organically. We can feed people organically, but we can't feed the whole country organically. It's very expensive. The American consumer don't want to put up with a wormhole in some stuff, a little discoloration. They want it perfect. When they see product laying on the shelf, they want it perfect. And the producer simply cannot produce organically without crop protection products. Like Russ says, we'll all starve to death.
Go ahead, Jimmy.
Can I add one more thing?
If it's
You care? It's short. I'm gonna tell you what it finally, illustrations always help. They help me, I think one of the things that finally brought it home to my friends that don't farm for a living up there is we have a fly that we have to spray for. It's called the spotted winged Drosophila. And we have to spray every 7 to 10 days for it with these products that are approved, And if you don't spray for it, what it does is it's a little miniature fly, and it lays a microscopic hole in a blueberry or strawberry or blackberry, and it takes 7 days for the larva that it puts in there to turn into a worm. And I worked through my horticulturist with my co-op, and I got a video of blueberries with spotted winged Drosophila worms crawling all over them, and I sent it to every senator that was in the chamber with me and texted it to them. And I told them, I said, this is what a world without plant protection products looks like. And I think that moves some folks.
That is a good visual, Russ. So thank you for that. All right, Duncan. Are there some new or upcoming federal initiatives aimed at helping farmers build long-term resilience? And as you're talking about that, things for mid and small farmers, as well as the larger producers that we have here in the state?
There are a bunch of initiatives and a lot of things coming. I think the end of January is going to be an exciting time as stuff comes down from DC. They get it going. I think on the instance, I look, but we get a lot of questions about small farmers, and we need them badly. And I started looking, trying to figure out where we're short there. I think we're right in the sweet spot of taking care of small farmers because we limit out the payments. We have AGI on larger farmers, and sometimes that's an impediment that maybe we're crippling the most talented amongst us, but they can teach and help our folks. One of the things that we're doing is trying to streamline our applications, our processes, make them more simple. That's been one of the fun things of coming in with very little experience is I can read that as a new farmer and go, what the heck does that mean? It ought not to be that hard. Whether it's somebody, I saw somebody recently, they asked them, they said, what's the biggest lie you've ever been told? And they said, it's just not that simple. And they kind of sat there and said, what do you mean? And he said, no, it's just not that simple is the biggest lie I've been told. We need to make our programs simpler, easier, more accessible. There's a lot of technology coming that we're bringing up that will be here soon that will allow it to be easier. Younger people, smaller farmers and things like that will have access because quite frankly, when you're doing it all on the farm, you don't have time to go to our office and sit down and do all those things. We need to come to you. We need to make it easier in your hand. We need to make it easier to access and simpler to understand so it takes less time. I've got a good bit of my staff back there that do a great job. And since I've been here, they have been charged and given the freedom to make it simpler and to be more involved with the small farmers to help them get it through so that they can be more successful. Because the bottom line is making it where all farmers can be profitable. And if that works, we'll grow our farming community. If it doesn't, we're in trouble.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Thank you very much. Any other cards out there that Regina can pick up? You got any? Just go ahead and we got a couple over here on this side. All right, we got a couple here. I'll start with. So this first one is a good connection to the last conversation we were just having about the importance of buying locally and U.S. grown food products. However, this is the key thing. Will the consumer be willing to pay the difference in the price of domestically grown products? And also, how do we get the consumer to understand the importance of U.S. agriculture stability and I would say sustainability? Who's got the right answer for that?
I don't want to take.
Well, I'll yield my time to the senator so that I get through, but the administration recognizes that everybody shops with their pocketbook, and we all want to be an environmentalist. We all want to help until you have to choose based off of what you have. And so helping make it more affordable on an even playing field for the American farmer, that's what we need to make sure that we accomplish so that when you go in there, there's no price difference, and that American flag makes a big difference.
I'm just going to say, I'm a history nerd, and you know that. I'm the kind of guy that reads books on the history of the Farm Bill, and go back to World War II, and you look at really, it's been in the last 40 years under Republican and Democratic administrations that we've been putting these regulations on, and it's caused what we've seen is we've seen so many, especially in the manufacturing and agricultural industry, we've seen the exportation of American jobs, and when you look at, there's a lot of talk gets talked about tariffs, but the truth is the commodity prices are pretty much unchanged from the last 2 years of the Biden administration. You don't hear that a lot in the narrative that's out there. I've always said this when it comes to, would everybody in this room agree that it is imperative for national security to keep the American farmer in business? Does everybody agree with that? Does everybody agree that it is imperative that we keep a manufacturing industry so that we can produce the tools of warfare to defend this nation? Does everybody agree with that? All right, ask yourself this. You go back to 1942 when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. We look back now like Allied victory was assured, but I promise you in 1942 it wasn't. Japan had taken over all those islands in Asia, Europe. Hitler had taken over all of Europe. Britain was a lone democracy on the European continent, right? But what did we do? We mobilized our manufacturing sector. And Edsel Ford, he went to work and he built the Willow Run plant. And in 2 years, Ford Motor Company was producing a B-24 bomber every 63 minutes. So I know that people talk a lot about tariffs, but the truth is, and this is where I get very frustrated and I see the hypocritical part of it, is, we talk about tariffs, but if you're not willing to talk about the regulations, if you're not going to do away with the regulations where the American farmer can compete on the level playing field, then the only avenue that you have is for tariffs to level the playing field. Now, as for me, I remember when President Trump put the tariff on steel. I'm okay if I've got to pay $600 more or $800 more for a 6-foot rotary mower because of a tariff that keeps us from losing our steel industry. So that we live in a world today geopolitically where it is scary. Things look so much like the 1930s. I'm okay with paying $800 more for a rotary mower, so long as if we have to go to war, God forbid, with Russia or China, that we're not dependent on China for the steel to build the tanks that it takes to defend our shores. And so, that is the thing that when we get to talking, having these policy discussions, let's just be honest with ourselves on it, because we talk about buying American. The American consumer is going to pay. The American consumer is going to go in and buy. And if it's a tariff that it takes to make it where it levels the playing field so that American farmer can be in business, that keeps the American farmer in business, so that we're not dependent upon other countries for the ability to feed our children, I'm okay with that.
Ken, anything to add?
Yeah, Duncan brought up the fact that when it costs more, you got to choose, am I going to pay more for this, or is this import over here less? What are we going to do? And as Russ also said too, that's a question of us as producers and business owners. Are we going to pay more and buy American, or are we going to pay less and support the overseas product? And it may be cheaper. The products coming in overseas may be cheaper to start with, but there'll become a time when it's not cheaper, and the cost is going to be much greater. Our defending our national security is, what is the cost of doing that? If we can't defend ourselves as a country, what is that cost going to be then?
Okay, very good. Here's a question about labor. Hot topic, right? So what else is needed to fix and address labor costs, and I would add labor issues that producers are facing? Producers are facing what labor? Well, how can we better address the issues and problems with labor at the producer level to help producers?
Well, speaking from the vegetable side of it, specialty crop, labor is our biggest expense. It's our biggest cost out there. And if we had to do what we do, relying on local domestic labor, we couldn't do it. We'd be out of business. So that means either we're going to have to import our labor supply, or we're going to have to import our goods that we're producing here in the U.S. We're going to have to do one of the two. There's simply not the amount of labor, not anywhere near the amount of labor needed out there to produce the crops that we produce. That labor has gotten to be very expensive, and I don't understand why we have been required to guarantee a worker $16.08 when that worker's only making about $2.50 in his own country. And the $16.08 is what we're paying. We have to pay to bring him here. We have to furnish him free housing, free utilities, free transportation to work. That's way out of balance, and that is putting us as I said, in an adverse position to being able to compete with imports coming in from Mexico and Central America. So, I don't have all the answers to the labor situation, but I think we're much better off producing those products here in our country. The spinoff effect in our economy, how, the money that it generates from farmers producing here in our country versus just bringing the products in from another country. I think we're much better off importing our labor and producing those crops here.
Any other thoughts on labor?
I'll just, everything you said is 100% correct. You know, I can't overstate how important the help that we've gotten on the H-2A wage rate is. I mean, literally $250 million a year in our state alone. And it is, it's an expensive process, and I would like to see that be moved under the Department of Agriculture. I don't know, I know that when Sonny was there, they were working on it, but I think that program would be, I think it could work better if it was under that agency. And anything that we can do to lower the cost. I mean, you know, one of the things that and Chris Butts is an expert on this, and you know, there was a lawsuit that we won where they were going to allow H-2A workers to unionize. And so, you know, you bring people over here and you've got what, $1,000, $1,500 before, when you get them here, you know, and then you're having to pay $1,608 and pay for the housing. And then you get them here and then they can unionize and they're only going to be here for 8 weeks, you know, or 2 months or whatever else. We won that case. You know, just, and now after some of these groups are suing now after the Trump administration came out and lowered the prevailing wage, you know, it gets back to the point that I'm talking about. Because some of these folks that are doing this, when they go into Walmart or whatever else and they say, you know, product of Peru or product of Mexico, I don't see them, you know, raising a fit that we're supporting, you know, products that are certainly grown in a much different wage rate environment than what we've got. You know what I mean? And so I just think that we can continue to work on that and try to, especially the regulatory burden and also the delays. I get calls every year, and Charles White is here and Alice Johnson is here, and they can tell you, because I forward it to them, they deal with it all the time with delays. And I can't tell you how scary it is for a farmer that's got $3 or $4 million out there, and he's dependent on this workforce to get it harvested. And, you know, they're delayed 4 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever it is, you know, and that's something that we've got to work on and improve. I guarantee you, Alice and Charles will tell you, they'd probably about 20% of their aggravation would go away if we could get that taken care of.
Is that right, Allison? Yeah. Okay. Duncan, anything to add on labor?
Just speak up. Make sure your politicians hear the things you're dealing with and the problems that you have. And also at farmers.gov, there's a place in there to go put in comment as a farmer, and they actually look at all of those. It doesn't go into a big, deep hole. They're looking at each of them. They actually call and ask us about some of the local issues that are reported in there. So speaking up so that they know, so that they can help with the regulations. The Trump administration is listening. They're data oriented. They're taking it all in, and they're working really hard to try to make it better for all the farmers. And so make sure your voice is heard.
Very good. All right, we'll wrap up with this one last question that came in, and we'll conclude the panel. So we have quite a few educational institutions here, some students and faculty and others. So this is a good question related to that. So what should ag educators ensure that they are covering in the classes for that next generation? So, you know, think about undergraduate, graduate students, and what are some of those high priority topics that students need to know that are moving out to the ag industry?
Well, I think it's important that the educators, that they know and they understand what growers are actually dealing with. You know, we want the consumer to buy American products, and when our product is more expensive than something coming in overseas, they need to know why it's more expensive. It ain't the farmer's just filling his pockets up with money. The farmer's having to pay more to do what he does than these producers in other countries. And therefore, we've got to sell our product for more money in order to be competitive and be able to compete with those products that are coming in. So I think they need to know the facts and understand the landscape out there that growers are having to deal with, the everyday challenges that we have to deal with, so they can be aware of that and pass that on to others that they're educating to where the general population understands what the situation is and why it's important to buy American and why American products currently cost more than a lot of other products that are coming in from overseas.
Well, I would just say one thing that I know I've talked to you about this before, and I hope together we can get it done, but I'd love to see a master's program within the ag school on agricultural policy. I don't know who you pointing at over
All
there.
right, all my, let's see, all the folks from Ag Economics Department, let's just
Yeah.
say.
Well, so much of what we do and so much that affects the farmer, we can affect so much on the state level, but so much of it is on the federal level. And I think that the more people that we have coming along that can have that expertise, to be able to go fight for the American farmer, I think those are tools that we need to put in the next generation. And we've done stuff on the state level like funding elementary ag education. A lot of it so much is just about understanding, and also to teach kids that you don't necessarily have to be a farmer to be in a field that you're supporting the American farmer. You can be a researcher, you could be an agricultural lobbyist, you could be working for the Farm Service Agency, you can be in the equipment business, you can be a scientist at developing the next generation of plant protection products. I mean, there's a whole realm there. You can be the breeder that is breeding new varieties. It takes all of those folks, to be able to keep our industry moving forward in the future, because my understanding is that we've got to increase food production by 70% by the year 2050 to be able to feed the world. And so, that's kind of goes back again to, which, by the way, there's a lot of, I remember one time, I'm a big Allman Brothers fan. And I came back one time and stopped at Big House in Macon, and there was a guy working the cash register there. I was going to buy myself an Allman Brothers album and a T-shirt. He asked me what I did, and I told him I was a blueberry farmer. And he said, "Do you grow organic?" He was kind of he's sort of a hippie kind of guy, And I said, "No, sir." I said, "I'm a conventional grower." And his face just dropped, and he looked at me like, whatever. And I said, "Sir," I said, you do understand that organic growers still use pesticides, don't you?" And he goes, "No." I said, "Yes, sir. I mean, it's just, in some cases, it can be some of the same pesticides, but they're organically approved pesticides." So, education, that's another thing, educating the public. But, and I want to just finish with this, because I think this is the last question. It's an honor to be here, and thank you for all that you do. Thank you for your support of our #1 industry. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention some people that are phenomenal advocates for our state's farmers. One of them is my roommate, Sam Watson. Sam carried both the CUVA bill and he carried SB 144. Tyler Harper is a tremendous advocate. I was just down there in his office last week. I've got an intern from UJ, Miss Elle Moss. Miss Elle's fabulous. She's from Morgan County. And Tyler was so gracious to allow her to come down into his command and control center with the latest outbreak of the avian flu in Walker County, and to show what all is involved with that and all the multiple state and federal agencies that are involved with that. People like Drew Eccles, who I'm so thankful, years ago, before he and I either one were ever in the legislature, were going up there with Gary Black to testify on labor. And he's now the chairman of the Senate Economic Development Committee. And I'm so thankful for that, because is it not great that we have a farmer that is in that position now that is from our state's largest industry? People like Angie Osteen and Jacqueline Ford. I mean, there's a whole group of us up there. We call ourselves the Farm Caucus. But again, our speaker, our lieutenant governor, and our governor, we couldn't get anything done up there without them, and they support and understand agriculture. So I just wanted to mention those folks because it takes all of us.
Good deal. So Duncan, anything on that question related to teaching that next generation?
Just on what I'd love to see taught more is the programs that we offer at FSA, our farm loans that are an opportunity for people getting out of school, and also our programs. Because if you've got someone coming out of school that's a traditional family farmer, they just assume their parents know everything. And there's a lot of stuff as we get older, we just don't pay attention as much. Them knowing that might open a lot of opportunities, even for the generations above them, having that education, but also knowing when they step out, they're not alone. There are opportunities and specialists there to support them to help them get where they need it. Because a new student getting financing and getting into farming, there's a lot of opportunities we have at FSA, and for them to know more of that and really understand the programs before they get out, I think would give them a head start. And I'd also like to say, everybody Senator Goodman just mentioned is fighting really hard for you. As soon as I got my job, every one of those people.
And I forgot one, and he's really one of the most important ones, and he's one of my best friends in life. So Robert Dickey, the House Ag Chairman. So he is one of my best friends, and so
all of those, especially Robert Dickey, are fighting for you very hard. Each one of those people I talk to at least once a week. Most of the time, it's just giving suggestions to go up to Washington, D.C. They are working very, very hard for you. And then I get called and yelled at quite often to fix things. And we do, and our great staff gets on it, and we've opened a line of communication to make sure they can get directly to me. We don't have to. Alice and I were talking earlier. We're trying to be as local as we can be to make things happen quickly. And all of those folks are fighting really hard. And thank you. I get aggravated at them sometime, and I'll tell them that, but they are fighting very, very hard for you to make sure that we get what you need to you.
Okay. So hopefully you've picked up a few things from our panel. They've had a lot of really hot topics that we've talked about here this morning. Please join me in thanking Duncan, Senator Goodman, and our Farmer of the Year last year, Kent Hamilton. Thanks, buddy. Okay, speaking of Farmer of the Year, next I'd like to invite up Dr. Lawton Stewart. Lawton is our Assistant Dean for Extension, and he's the one that oversees the nomination process for our Farmer of the Year. So he'll be making some comments in that announcement. So Lawton, great to have you here.
Thank you, Dean Place. As he said, I do get to announce, it's my privilege and honor to announce our 2026 Farmer of the Year. And for over 3 decades, this program has been recognizing leaders, providers, and innovators in our agricultural industry. And it's always amazing to look back at the previous winners and just see those leaders, those people that have provided for not just our industry, but for our society. And the diversity of agriculture that we have in this state makes me proud to be a part of it. Also want to say thank you to Chip Blaylock and everybody at Sunbelt Ag Expo, because our Georgia Farmer of the Year will represent us in that Southeastern competition that will be recognized at the Sunbelt Ag Expo in October. So with that, I'd like to make a few comments before I introduce or I welcome our Farmer of the Year up to the stage. But Pete Gelber and his wife, Elizabeth Reed, are the owners and operator of Barrington Dairy Farms. And it's a pretty big enterprise, and we'll lump it together in Barrington. And it's interesting, they started in the dairy industry here in Georgia approximately 30 years ago by buying a smaller dairy and expanding it, improving it. And it's interesting the story of how they expanded and how they went about that to where they milk over 10,000 cows now. And I could spend a long time telling you exactly how many cows, the number of pounds of milk they produce on a day. But I think it's interesting if you hear his journey and hear some of the things they do that makes him very unique in a leader in the agricultural industry. Now, when I first met Pete, I realized he was a good guy and must be doing something right because I believe he and I use the same barber. And so that's we do have that in common. But when I started reading through what they're doing and when I visit with him and Elizabeth, it's very interesting because I think what they've done is they focus not just on producing pounds of milk, but investing in a system that's sustainable and they can pass it on to generations to come. Not just their family, but also everybody involved with that industry. The three things that I really appreciate is one, the sustainability. We throw that term around a lot these days, sustainability, but the three things that are really focused on what they're doing, sustainability of the land, they've really focused on reducing their carbon footprint. In the dairy industry, there's a tremendous amount of nutrients that they have from the animal side, and they've developed a system, a unique system of being able to use those nutrients and apply it back to the crop side of their enterprise. They've also focused on their animals, and you hear a lot that happy cows live in California. Well, happy cows are here in Georgia too, but animals that are well taken care of produce better, and they have a much more productive life in their system. So they've done a tremendous amount to focus on cow comfort. But also something that I really appreciate is their emphasis on their employees. And if you meet Pete and talk to him and Elizabeth, they have really focused on taking care of their employees and making sure that they are taken care of, that they understand that they're appreciated, and that they are invested in the company. And if you hear how long many of these people have been with them, you know that they do take care of those people. So with that, it's my honor to announce our 2026 Georgia Farmer of the Year, Pete Gelber and his wife, Dr. Elizabeth Reed. I'm going to invite Pete to come up and say a few words, but also want to recognize his nominating agent, Madison Luke from Madison Luke from Macon County. She's the one that nominated Pete and Elizabeth. So with that, let's welcome Pete up to the stage.
All right, thank you. You know, everybody tells me I got a face for radio, so pictures are okay though, I suppose. So anyway, as you can tell, I'm not from the South, but I got here as fast as I could. So I was born in the Bronx, in New York City, and my father wanted to keep me out of trouble, and he got me a job on a dairy farm. So anyway, that was the beginning of my story, and I've really been blessed by the Lord. I was given a great toolbox to work with, and part of that toolbox was being really good in math and economics, and working like a burro. So those two combinations, and then I've been also been blessed to be able to accumulate some really super people in my business over the years. But anyway, I had great parents. They had vision to get me out of the city. And when I went to college, my thoughts was to make enough money so I didn't have to move back to the Bronx. If anybody's ever been to the Bronx, it's a good place to be from. So anyway, I was sitting in an economics class, and the teacher said, well, the average dairy cow can make $300 profit. Well, that 30 cow dairy I worked on, I did the math, that was $9,000. Well, I was pretty old, but even back then, $9,000 wasn't much money. So I said, man, I got to milk 500 cows. So that's when my start got, I got focused on economies of scale. So got out of college, rolled around New York State for a few years, and I went down to Florida when I was 30 to work for this guy named Ron St. John. And Ron St. John turned into my mentor, my best friend, Then he was my employer, my partner, then my banker, and now he's still my best friend. So I've been very fortunate, and he gave me a lot of opportunity, and I took it with both hands. So we bought these bankrupt dairies called Mastock Dairies in Macon County back in around 2000, and tried to run them from Florida and failed miserably. So then 2007, I moved up to Macon County, and I bought my partners out in 2013, and we've been wildly successful. We have over 15,000 cows now, and we have super production and super milk quality. But I think besides being the proudest of having happy cows, I also have happy employees, and we have programs where we can we buy employees' houses, we have them participate in our profitability, and I look at the farm as so I have 5 grandkids, and I love them to death, but I really want them to be happy, well-adjusted adults, whether they work for me, just because I like getting up at 4 in the morning and milking cows every day, which I still do. Doesn't mean that they have to. And if they want to become an engineer or a rocket scientist or whatever, school teacher, that's fine. But the people that are interested in agriculture, those are the ones I want to continue my farm in the future. So that's my attitude, being not from a dairy and from agriculture in the beginning, I think is different from a lot of you folks out here that had it passed down through the generations. So, but anyway, we're still a family farm. We just have 200 families, and I really believe that in my heart. So thanks for this award. It's quite an honor, and I kind of would like to use this platform to push the dairy industry in our state. Milk has all of a sudden kind of gotten cool again. You know, people 10 years ago, people said milk had 3 things in it: pesticides, hormones, and antibiotics. You know, now everybody talks about the protein in milk and what a wonderful food it is again. So we need dairy. Dairy is growing in our state, and we need more processing. And you can't just sell more milk in gallon jugs. We have to, as a state, we need to bring in milk that's coming here already in cartons, like Lactate and Fairlife. So anyway, to you people in government, this is my pitch to: we need more process in here, and we need help. And I'm a really good guy at getting milk out of cows and getting people to run through a wall for me in the middle of the night milking cows. But I know very little about marketing. So with that, I'll stop. Thank you.
Congratulations, Pete. Very well deserved. And I got a funny thing and then a serious thing to tell you about Pete. So a few years ago, we did a tour to your place, and this was right after the Commissioner Tyler Harper was elected. And y'all know he looks a little bit on the young side, right? So we pull up to Pete's farm, and Pete's getting to know one another. And he wanted to know if Tyler was one of my students up at the college. You remember that? It was just actually joking with him, but I thought that was pretty funny. But the other thing, serious thing about Pete, we heard from your employees over and over again how much they appreciate working for you and being there and your approach for them. And I think that really is something will always remember about you and your operation. So congratulations. And I would also emphasize what Pete is saying about our dairy industry. We are the only state in the Southeast that's increasing production, actually 20% over the last 15 years. And there's opportunity to grow that. we as a college are actively working with producers and others to try to make that happen. So yeah, we need more processing here. So couldn't agree with you more. So with that, we're going to take a 15, actually 17-minute break. We are going to start back here at 10:45 with our next talk about the agriculture outlook. Okay, so feel free to go to the restroom and grab a refreshment. Okay, as you're making your way back to your seats, and also we still got folks with us online. Travis, they all good to go? All right. One of the key things we like to do at our ag forecast is really give you an opportunity to understand where we are with our ag economy. And with that, I'm very pleased to introduce Dr. Ford Ramsey to give that Georgia ag economy outlook. So Dr. Ramsey is an associate professor of agricultural and applied economics in our College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences, where he specializes in agriculture economics and policy. And he'll be reviewing the near-term fundamentals of our national economy and agriculture, and also their implications for Georgia's agriculture economy. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ramsey.
Yeah, so in 2025, we planted more acres of peanuts in Georgia than we did cotton. That's the first time that's happened since 1993. In September of 2025, the steers and heifers price reported by USDA was $241 per hundredweight. And I heard stories of dairymen selling day-old calves for over $1,000. Just last week, we had the World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimates published by USDA, and they estimate that corn yield for 2025 in the U.S. was 186.5 bushels per acre, which is a record high. So I think those three facts tell us a little bit about where agriculture's been in 2025 and where we're going in 2026. And I hope impress upon you the unprecedented nature of some of the things that we're seeing in the agricultural sector. So in putting together this outlook, what we've done is to go through all the data that's available from USDA and try and distill that down. And I'm first going to talk about what is going on in the U.S. agricultural economy, and then talk about what's going on here in Georgia. So when we talk about the ag economy, we're usually interested in two statistics or numbers: net farm income and net cash farm income. And the difference between those is basically whether you're using cash or accrual accounting. The cash number only includes cash transactions. Net farm income would include some other things like changes in inventories and depreciation and things like that. What's included on the income side of this? The majority of the income is coming from crop receipts or livestock receipts, as you would expect, but there's also some farm-related numbers in there. In Georgia, forest products is a somewhat important number in that farm income, but the income number would also include machine hire, imputed value of dwellings, and things like that. And what you can see in the slide or the chart is that for 2025, these are both forecasts. So we had one of the panelists talk about it takes a while for the government to get data and process all that. So the 2025 numbers are still forecasts, but you can see that we had increased farm income, both farm income and net cash farm income in 2025. Fairly significant increase, brings us above where we were in 2023, still lower than the record high in 2022. I mentioned that the major source of income in those net farm income numbers is from crop and livestock receipts. And one of the big points I'd like to make is that we see a pretty big difference in what's happening on the crop side versus what we've seen happening on the livestock side. So this graph shows those crop and animal product receipts as well as all commodities. And so you can see that the receipts have gone up. They increased into 2025, but there's a difference between crops and livestock. The crop receipts fell, as you would probably expect, and the livestock receipts increased. They just increased enough that it overcame that loss in the crop receipts. So the end result of that was that you had an increase in the net farm income, but it's largely coming from the livestock side of the story. The production expenses are flat after increasing quite a lot since 2020. A lot of that was just inflation. So the blue line is the nominal production expenses, whereas the yellow line is the inflation adjusted expenses. So the good news is that those do appear to have plateaued a little bit. The manufactured inputs were flat. The farm origin inputs were what was up in 2025. The second point I'd like to make is that those net farm income numbers include government payments as a form of income. So they include any government payments, including indemnities from federal crop insurance program. You can see that we had a pretty big increase in government payments in 2025. So that increased farm income numbers are partly due to this big increase in the government payments. And in 2026, one would expect that those government payments are going to be significant as well, and I'll talk more about that. Part of the increase we're going to see in government payments is due to the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. So if you know anything about farm policy, typically what we've had is every 5 years we had a farm bill. And the legislators in Washington would hash that out. We'd get the farm bill. The farm bill typically included actually the nutrition programs in the most expensive part of the farm bill, but it also included obviously all the agricultural policies. We've had a little change in that we did not get a farm bill as a standalone piece of legislation. Most of the changes that were proposed ended up in the One Big Beautiful Bill. And I've listed probably the most important changes on this slide. The one of most importance to Georgia was change in statutory reference prices for price loss coverage. So you can see there that we had, relative to the 2018 Farm Bill, the reference price for peanuts went up a little more than 17%, and the reference price for cotton went up a little more than 13%. So given that change in the reference prices, we're going to expect pretty sizable payments through price loss coverage and ARC, the Title I commodity programs, in 2026 and moving into the future. Another big change was a change to base acres. So producers can now update their base acres. We also saw increased premium subsidies for federal crop insurance program, and probably of interest to Georgia for sure is there was a call for USDA to develop a crop insurance program for poultry. So it's not exactly clear from the legislation what this is going to look like, but it appears that what they have in mind is a crop insurance policy that's going to indemnify poultry producers if they have a hurricane or high wind, something like this. So that's probably, of course, driven by what we saw with Helene, where you have losses to poultry operations that are not covered basically through any federal crop insurance policy. There was also increased funding for trade promotion as well in that piece of legislation. Now, I mentioned that crop insurance was strengthened in the One Big Beautiful Bill in the sense that all else equal, you should be paying less for your crop insurance now. Not a lot less, but it should be less. But one thing we have to realize is that crop insurance is not a cure-all for some of the ailments we see in the agricultural economy. So crop insurance is intended to pay when you have production losses or decreased prices over the growing season. So if you have a period of prolonged low prices, crop insurance is not necessarily going to pay in that situation. And of course, that's what we've seen with some crops recently. In terms of the wealth, assets, and debt, both debt and assets have been rising. It turns out the debt is rising just a little bit faster than the assets. The debt to equity ratio in 2025 was 15.47. The debt to asset ratio was 13.4. And both of those are a little bit lower than where they were in 2020. They were a lot higher. In terms of the liquidity and solvency considerations, the USDA forecasts that solvency for farms is going to remain relatively stable, and the liquidity cash flow situation is going to be improved. One statistic you can look at is Chapter 12 bankruptcies for farms. And if you look at those in the Southeast, they increased from 2023 to 2024. I looked at the numbers a week ago for 2025, and they increased again in 2025. So the Chapter 12 bankruptcies are up, but they're still lower than what we saw in 2020 and years prior. So in terms of bankruptcies, we've not realized the situation that we're seeing in terms of the crop side of things quite yet. If we have a few more years of prices like these, unfortunately, we may see a big increase in the bankruptcy numbers. The last thing I want to talk about for the U.S. situation is monetary policy. This is kind of an interesting chart. So when we talk about the interest rates that have been in the news quite a lot today or recently, those are set by the Open Market Committee, and that committee has a certain number of members. If you counted the dots here, that's how many members they have on the Open Market Committee. And what they do is they poll the members of that committee where they think interest rates are going to go in the future. So the current federal funds rate is 3.6. If you look at the chart, you can see that most of the members of that committee are expecting a decrease in the federal funds rate, in the interest rates, in 2026. In fact, there's somebody on the committee, you could probably figure out who this would be, who is projecting that it's going to be down near 2. So we can expect probably some type of easing in terms of the interest rates in 2026. Of course, that helps borrowing costs for producers, although changes in the federal funds rate do not always pass through fully to changes in the borrowing costs for producers, or say someone borrowing from mortgages. If you've looked at mortgage interest rates, you know that we've seen more movement in the federal funds rate than what you've seen in mortgage interest rates. So what about Georgia in relation to that? So in terms of the U.S., what we saw was net farm income was up in 2025. Basically, you had positive receipts, increased receipts on livestock. You had lower receipts on crops, and you had sizable government payments that were going into that net farm income story. So what's the deal with Georgia? Well, of course, agriculture remains our number one sector. In 2025 Ag Impact Report, we estimate over $17 billion in the direct value of Georgia commodities, over $91 billion in the economic contribution, and over 380,000 jobs. The top 5 commodities, and this bounces around from year to year, but it's probably what you would expect, is that poultry tends to be, in terms of value, the most important commodity. So we have broilers, eggs, cotton, peanuts. Beef numbers are up quite a bit with the beef prices. And then there are some other important contributors. So greenhouse, fruits and vegetables, when you take those together, is pretty sizable. Dairy, tree nuts, pecans, and timber. In terms of where those products are going, we rank in the middle of the pack in terms of the value of our agricultural exports. We're number 19 in 2024. These are the latest numbers that USDA has out there, is 2024. And the 2 industries that would be most affected by any kind of trade action would be cotton and poultry. And I did look this up, actually the 2025 numbers. And if you talk about poultry exports from Georgia, the number 1 and number 2 destinations are China and Canada, which have been in the news. And if you talk about cotton, historically, China has been one of the big ones. In 2025, actually, they're not in the top 5 export destinations for Georgia cotton. We're talking about Pakistan, Bangladesh, Vietnam, things like that. I think I read that China may start buying some U.S. cotton in 2026, so maybe we'll see them appear back in the numbers there. But cotton and poultry are really the main, the big value exports. In terms of what's happened historically, the livestock exports continue to grow, and we've seen declining value for cotton and pecans. Now let me talk about Georgia farm income, and this is a little interesting. The way USDA puts their statistics together, we don't have even an estimate of what the state farm income is for 2025. So we have an estimate of what U.S. farm income was for 2025, but we don't have an estimate of what state farm income is. So I have to try and predict what the 2025 Georgia farm income is going to be, plus what the 2026 farm income is going to be. In 2024, U.S. farm income was down. Georgia farm income was up in 2024. So we had $4.7 billion. It's still well below what we had in 2022. And you all saw the government payments chart. We've had kind of declining government payments until we get into 2025. So that farm income in 2024, the reason Georgia had an increase in farm income in 2024, as opposed to the rest of the U.S., was basically due to poultry receipts. We had increased poultry receipts, and that carried the state up in 2024. So what do I think the outlook is for both 2025, since I have to try and predict what the numbers are going to come out looking like in 2025, as well as in 2026. And my job's a little easier than Amanda's because I only have to talk about basically net farm income. I'm just talking about the economy as a whole here. So you have to realize that there's a couple of commodities, or maybe 3 or 4 commodities, that account for over 75% of the value of agricultural production in Georgia. So when we want to talk about the ag economy as a whole, that's our focus. I mean, they're going to carry that farm income number for the state. It's going to be dependent on largely on what happens in those commodities. The big increase we saw forecasted for U.S. farm income, I suspect, is going to be reflected in Georgia farm income. So when the numbers come out for 2025, my suspicion is we will have increased both net farm income and net cash farm income in Georgia, largely for the same reasons that the U.S. farm income is projected to have gone up in 2025. It's the livestock side of the story and government payments, because they figure into that. In terms of 2026, I really don't see much, unfortunately, that gives me hope that we're going to see improvement on the crop side of things in 2026. So unless we have a big event in terms of some trade action or really bad weather conditions in one of our competitors, there's not much to suggest that on the crop side of the story you're going to see improved prices. In terms of livestock, what could be most disruptive, I think, are disease incidents. So avian influenza, the New World screwworm. So unfortunately, barring something happening in terms of disease on the livestock side or weather conditions in our competitors, I don't see much change in farm income in 2026. So I think we will be up in 2025, but 2026 is going to be pretty stable. Now, the last point I have on here is important, that we've had significant government payments, and we're going to continue to have significant government payments. So if you look at the changes that have been made, we have bridge payments that are going to come out this year, and those are to bridge us to payments from ARC and PLC or from crop insurance. They're talking in Washington about additional funding for basically more bridge payments. So for sure, the government payment side of the story is going to increase in 2026. We're going to see some increasing in the farm income numbers, but that hides the situation that I'm sure you all are seeing on the ground, which is that there's pretty significant cost price squeeze on the crop side of the story. So that's where I'm going to leave off. In terms of net farm income, it's going to go up in 2025 and it's going to be stable, but that's hiding a lot of what we're seeing on the ground, which I'm sure Amanda will talk more about when she discusses specific commodity outlooks. I think I'll take a few questions, and then I can come back up after Amanda's done too, if we want to do it that way. Any questions or comments? Yeah, that was just for the Southeast. Yeah. Yeah. Where was that? There it was, yeah. USDA, who gets it from Farm Credit. Well, this is, I mean, these numbers are from 2024, so that's 2 years. There's a couple different sources you can get that bankruptcy information from, and this is only Chapter 12 bankruptcies, so it doesn't really paint a full picture of what could be going on. But the lag is not as long as you get with some of the other statistics. But they've certainly they've gone up in our area 2024 into 2025. Yeah. No, the 2025 we already know is up. 2026, yeah, probably you see the same thing. Because the economic conditions have not improved. I mean, you've even seen some weakening on the livestock side of the story in the last half of 2025. I mean, poultry prices slid on increased production, and probably we hit the peak on cattle, it seems like. So bankruptcies should follow, unfortunately.
Thanking for Waste and Management.
All right.
Okay, so Ford, thank you very much. I appreciate that overview of U.S. and Georgia ag economy. Next, I'd like to invite up Ms. Amanda Smith to give more of a commodity-specific overview. And as Ford said, maybe more of a challenging task, Amanda. So Amanda is a Senior Public Service Associate in our Department of Agriculture and Applied Economics with us here in the college. And she provides timely applied economic research and outreach activities for Georgia's row crop industries and commodity groups to help improve efficiency, profitability, and resource conservation. So Amanda, great to have you here and welcome to the stage.
All right, good morning, everybody. It's good to see you all. Thank you for being here. All right, so I'm going to give you the outlook, the 2026 outlook for Georgia commodities. But first, I need to recognize the team that put together this slide set. This shows a lot of the faculty working within Extension, and on each slide, you will get to see a nice little photograph in the corner that shows like who's the lead in that area. So I do want to recognize the efforts of all of my colleagues in the Department of Ag and Applied Economics that helped put this final slide set together. And several of them are here this morning. So if we have questions that are outside of my expertise area, hopefully they can answer those for you. All right, so first we're going to talk about production inputs and expenditures. Also, just a little disclaimer, I don't usually talk from a script. However, I didn't write a lot of these slides, so I'm going to be talking from a script for several of them. So please excuse that. I will try to change my tone and fluctuation so it's not boring. But anyway, so I am going to be talking from a script too. So, All right, so overall total production costs were mostly stable from 2024 to 2025, rising by just 1%. So there were some changes in costs, but they were kind of absorbed from the different categories. And this is for U.S. producers in general. We saw higher input costs for livestock and poultry purchases, obviously purchasing beef cattle, and higher labor expenses as well as interest expenses. And then on the other side, we saw decreases in pesticides, fuel expenditures, and feed. In 2026, the outlook is for interest rates to be lower. Farm operating loan rates are expected to range from 6.5% to 8.5%. So that's certainly lower than 2025. Not a big drop, but every little bit helps. As far as fertilizers, unfortunately, we saw those prices climb in 2025, and they're expected to stay high in 26 as far as nitrogen and phosphorus are concerned. Potash is likely to stay relatively stable, though. Farm diesel, we're looking at that staying relatively flat. We have that the same price we had it in the enterprise budgets as last year at $3 per gallon for farm diesel. Obviously, there's going to be some variation here and there, but farm diesel is expected to be flat in 2026. And reviewing some of the input cost data that we got, it looks like pesticides are going to be up a little bit and machinery and equipment up a little bit as well. Finally, in 2026, one of the most notable fluctuations in input costs relates to the adverse effects wage rate, which was mentioned a little bit earlier. Georgia producers who utilize H-2A labor will see a slight relief in the 2026 wage rates due to recent changes in the U.S. Department of Labor's methodology for calculating the adverse effects wage rate. So after a 34% increase in H-2A wage rates from 22 through 25, the new adverse effects wage rate for many Georgia operations is set to decline about 10% from last year. Last year it was at $16 per hour, and it's projected to be an average of $14.47 per hour in 2026. Excuse me. Before moving on into the row crops and other commodities outlook, I have to put in a shameless plug for the UGA row crop enterprise budgets and the fruit and vegetable budgets, our livestock budgets, all of the UGA enterprise budgets that we have available. When Kent Hamilton was talking about the importance of cost of production, I almost stood up and gave him a round of applause because I was like, yes, that is what I say all the time. So these enterprise budgets are an important tool for you to take a look at and help estimate your cost of production. They're not going to be exact to what cost of production is for you as a grower or for the growers that you work with, but we highly recommend that you take a look at them, use them as a template, and estimate what cost of production is going to be. They can be an effective tool in figuring out what break-even prices need to be and break-even yields, and you can use them once you know that cost of production to potentially forward contract at prices above that to help cover break-even, lock in a little bit of a profit. So, pardon my shameless plug there. All right, so now we're going to talk about cotton. Cotton historically has been one of the most important row crops to the state of Georgia and is still very, very important. But instead of planting as many acres as last year, it wasn't the lead in terms of acres. So in 2025, I'll go on and then I'll describe the chart next. All right, in 2025, Georgia growers planted 835,000 acres, which is the fewest acres planted to cotton in decades. And a lot of that is a reflection of the low prices for cotton. However, on the good side, for the individual farmers and growers that did plant it, yields were projected up to 1,047 pounds per acre. Not quite a yield record, but pretty close by almost 50 pounds. So just under the yield record for cotton production set several years ago, I think back in 2012. So it's just down by 50 pounds. Georgia production is expected to reach 1.8 million bales certainly one of the lowest production numbers that we've seen in several years, and that was due to the lower planted acres in response to the low prices, those calculating their cost of production and figuring out maybe this is not the most profitable choice for us in 2025. All right, so the chart that we have up here is looking at world cotton supply and demand. I'm going to use the laser. I think, yeah. All right, so the line across the top is looking at world global production, and then the bars are disappearance or demand. Oh, no, I'm sorry. The bars are production by countries. So, and you can see the countries across the bottom, and this is over the past 10 years. And then the top, the line is production or mill use. I'm getting tripped up because the other slides all have production at the top, so please excuse that. But anyways, these bars are showing production, and then the line at the top is showing demand. So global economic growth has slowed compared with previous years, returning to more typical long-term rates. Global cotton demand has stabilized and remains relatively strong. However, competition in global cotton production and exports has intensified for U.S. cotton, driven primarily by expanded acres in Brazil. Also, because the production costs are lower in Brazil, Brazilian farmers are able to remain profitable at the low adjusted world prices for cotton, while U.S. producers are experiencing significant losses. Trade uncertainty has further weakened the position of U.S. cotton as it has lost market access to China, traditionally one of our largest buyers, while Brazilian cotton has gained market share in China. As a result, U.S. cotton is currently in a transitional phase, seeking to stabilize existing markets outside of China and develop alternative export destinations. Without a significant improvement in demand for U.S. cotton, prices are likely to remain at their current low levels. Easing trade tension with China, however, would represent a positive development for the U.S. cotton sector. All right, so this chart is a little bit different in how it's formatted. This is showing U.S. peanut supply and demand. The top blue line is production. That bright green line at the bottom is ending stocks, and disappearance or utilization of peanuts is represented in each of the bars. All right, so going back to Georgia, Georgia peanut producers planted 920,000 acres in 2025. So what did I say about cotton? It was 835,000. Like Ford mentioned earlier, this is the first time in 30 years that peanut acres have exceeded cotton acres planted. From a yield standpoint, they were projected up compared to 2024 to 4,050 pounds per acre. And that resulted in combination with the large planted acres, a bumper crop of 3.7 billion pounds of peanuts, or 1.8 million farmer stock ton from Georgia alone. So we've got a lot of peanuts. 2025 presented peanut producers across the United States with a complex and evolving market environment. While acreage and production continued to expand, driven largely by growers shifting away from less profitable crops, the resulting surge in output has outpaced growth in both domestic use and export demand. As a result, U.S. peanut markets entered the 25-26 marketing year with rising ending stocks and increasing supply-side pressure. At the same time, export growth has remained sluggish and domestic food use has expanded only moderately, creating a widening imbalance between production and demand. Together, these factors contributed to a sharp post-harvest price decline in late 2025 and have raised concerns about the persistence of downward price pressure as the market adjusts to abundant supplies and a slower than expected demand. With U.S. peanut supplies continuing to rise, developing alternative markets and new uses has become increasingly important. Expanding export opportunities remains essential, but innovative non-food applications such as the use of peanut oil and sustainable aviation fuel also offer promising ways to absorb surplus production and strengthen long-term market outlook. All right, this chart is formatted similar to the previous chart. We've got production of corn at the top, ending stocks, that dark blue bottom line, and then disappearance and utilization in the bars. All right, the U.S. planted 98.8 million acres of corn and is projected to set a record 186.5 bushels per acre, which will result in a bin-busting record 17 billion bushels of corn. From a demand standpoint, feed is expected to utilize the majority of production at a projected 6.2 billion bushels of corn. I'm sorry, that's not a record, but it's pretty close. There is uncertainty about meeting this number based on the projections just because we have lower cattle on feed. And then also we have the occasional outbreak of highly pathic avian influenza and concerns about impacting poultry numbers. So we'll have to see if we can meet that full utilization. Moving on to ethanol, that's been made a lot of headlines in the news lately. We're projected to utilize 5.6 billion bushels of ethanol for corn, and that's basically kind of the capacity in terms of ethanol production at this point for the United States. There's been a big push by industry to encourage E15 ethanol use throughout the year and not just have it go through the summer season. That could certainly help improve utilization and demand for ethanol. It was not part of the current proposed spending package, but they're going to study it. So we'll see what happens there. If E15 does become all year, it would still take some time before we can utilize that much corn for ethanol because infrastructure needs to change from retail gas stores and things like that to be able to utilize E15 all year long. All right, so I want to shift your attention now to the highlight for corn, and that's that green bar right there at the top, and that's exports. So exports are on pace and projected to hit a record 3.2 billion bushels. This is very exciting for the corn industry. Obviously, we have a lot of corn, and so we need to export quite a bit of it. So the corn industry is very excited about the pace of exports and the strength of exports for sure. And they could potentially go up even higher because we're ahead of, on pace, or actually ahead of pace to hit that target. So that will certainly help with disappearance. Despite that, we still have ending stocks over 2 billion bushels, despite this really high use of feed, pretty high use of ethanol and exports. They're still looking at 2 billion bushel carryover. And so the market year average price outlook for corn is $4.10 from a national standpoint. I'll talk about more about Georgia in a couple slides. All right, so for soybeans, I have a similar slide that we've created for you to the previous two, looking at production and ending stocks in the lines, and then disappearance and demand in the bars. All right, so the U.S. planted fewer soybeans in 2025 at 81.2 million acres. Yields were projected up. So it's cool to say that, like almost every commodity, yields are projected up. So we had a phenomenal year in terms of production last year. It's really great news for the individual farmer. It doesn't really help from a supply and demand point as far as price is concerned because we have abundant production, but it does help the individual farmers. So despite lower planted acres, yields are projected up for soybeans at 53 bushel per acre, and that should result in a U.S. production of 4.3 billion bushels. And that is down from the 24-25 year. All right, so taking a look at exports first this time in terms of the chart that we have here, that's in green. Those are projected down 310 million bushels. China basically exited the market for the U.S. soybeans until late fall, which was too little too late. They agreed to purchase 12 million metric tons of soybeans, and then the next couple years, 25 million metric tons. But unfortunately for the U.S. soybean market, it was too little too late. Similar to cotton, Brazil has edged in to take the lead in terms of global market share for exports of soybeans, and they have continued that strong partnership with China to sell their soybeans there. So now taking a look at this chart, the highlight is for us to look at is that crush number. So that orange bar at the bottom, take a look at that in terms of demand for soybeans. We are looking at a record almost 2.6 billion bushels utilized for crush. Opportunities for soybean oil in sustainable aviation fuel and the biodiesel industries are certainly promising, and a way for us to utilize the soybeans that we grow here domestically until trade agreements can get put into place. All right, so shifting on to Georgia. This is a chart showing planted acres of corn, soybean, and wheat for Georgia over the last decade. And I'll talk about corn first. Georgia growers increased corn planted acres by almost 47% in 2025 to 550,000 acres. Yields were projected to set a record 187 bushel per acre. So this combined with the harvested acres is going to result in a bin-busting 93.5 million bushels of corn. That is an 88% increase for the state of Georgia from 2024. Due to abundant production nationally and here locally, prices are probably going to stay about the same where they were last year. And we had projections last year, season average price around $5 a bushel, and that's probably going to be the same. Of course, there will be some variation. We still have a strong positive basis in Georgia because we're still a corn deficit state. All right, moving on to soybeans for Georgia. We planted about 9% fewer acres of soybeans in 2025 at 155,000. Yields were expected up with a projected record 49 bushel per acre, again, setting another record. Overall, though, state production was down to 7.4 million bushels. Looking at the price ratio for corn and soybeans and where it stands right now, it still favors corn planted acres. Moving on to wheat. They were up in 2025 compared to 2024, and yields were projected to also set a record 66 bushel per acre. So in wheat, we planted 165,000 acres of wheat last year. And as far as the outlook for 2026 planted acres, I think we will see more corn in 2026. So we're going to have to keep looking for places to store it all. Wheat and soybean acres are likely to be stable in 2026. Okay, now we're going to move on to livestock, and we've got some differently formatted charts for livestock. All right, so this chart shows prices per hundredweight from January through December across the x-axis, with the red line showing the average price 2019 through 2023. The black or dark navy dotted line shows weekly 2024 prices, and the bright blue line at the top shows weekly 2025 prices per hundredweight. This is for feeder steers in Georgia. It's going to be really fun to talk about livestock because look at these prices. All right, so tight supplies are likely to support prices at very high levels in 2026. Cattle inventories appear to be stabilizing throughout 2026, but major expansion of the cattle herd is probably going to be delayed. It's just hard to justify retaining heifers and waiting when you need to rely on that income to support the farm business. Little bit of concern about consumer demand just because of high retail prices. Little bit concerned there about demand softening or people's ability or willingness to pay for the higher priced beef. So that is a certain risk to the outlook. All right, this chart is formatted similar to the previous one, but it shows U.S. monthly milk prices. The 2026 dairy outlook faces headwinds on increasing production that appears to be outpacing demand. So when production outpaces demand, that's when we see prices tend to go down. Potential improvements on the supply and demand balance may occur later in the year, and there are opportunities from new local processing. Not yet, but opportunities from new local processing could support Georgia producers this year. So that message is being heard that we need more processing locally. All right, moving on to poultry. This chart's a little bit different because it's not showing prices, it's showing actual production numbers. So the red is average production in terms of millions of pounds, and 24 is showing production in the black dotted line, and the blue dotted line is 2025 production in millions of pounds. These are, I believe they're national prices, weekly average chicken production in millions of pounds, not prices, production. The year ahead appears to be shaping up to be one of stable incremental growth for the poultry industry. After a strong start to 2025, significant production growth weighed on prices in the latter half. And in 2026, supply and demand will likely find a better balance with indications of relatively stable prices. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about the specialty crops industry. All right, this chart shows U.S. vegetable yield, production, and harvested acres. We've got yield in the blue at the top, production in the green, and the dotted black line shows harvested acres. And this is a percent of those values 1995 through 1997. So the yield line shows those numbers as a percent of what yield was in 1995 through 97. The vegetable industry is very dynamic. Oh yeah, and this dates back to 1995, so it's the past 30 years. The vegetable industry is very dynamic. In 2025, planted area was 912,000 acres, whereas harvested was about 906,000 acres. Due to continuous research, extension education, good agricultural practices, and technology adoption, crop yields are consistently increasing over the past 3 decades. In 2025, the USDA reported yields of 461 hundredweight per acre for vegetables. Per capita consumption in 2024 was 376 pounds, which is a 3.3% decrease compared to 2023, which is an indication that Americans are eating less vegetables. Hopefully, with MAHA and the new food pyramid, people will follow the recommendations and consume more fruits and vegetables. All right, these charts show prices over the last 3 years from January through December for cucumbers, tomatoes, onions, and sweet corn. In 2025, fresh vegetable market experienced mixed signals. Growers' prices decreased for key crops like onion, sweet corn, tomatoes, cucumbers, cauliflower, broccoli, and lettuce, most of which are in the top 10 vegetable crops in Georgia. Specialty crops farmers experienced weather challenges as it was wet in the west and dry in the southeast. The good news is that the Trump administration will provide $1 billion to specialty crop growers through the Farm Bridge Assistance Program. We all know that more is needed in that area, and USDA has committed to broader efforts to continue to strengthen farm markets and the U.S. ag safety net. All right, this graph that we have up here shows the grower price index for the past several years, from January to December for fruits and tree nuts. And then the black dotted line shows the average pricing from 2020 through 2022. Despite the challenges faced by the fruits and tree nuts industry, the specialty crop growers are resilient and the industry is still sustainable. For instance, the fruits and tree nuts growers received better prices in 2025 compared to the previous 2024 crop season. In July 2025, fruits and tree nuts GPI, or the grower price index, was 171. In the first quarter, the GPI was downward trending, but still higher than 2024, and started escalating until July, where the GPI was 7% higher than in July the previous year, and 11% higher than in July 2023. Although it's difficult to predict the prices in 2026, we believe the industry will continue to be strong. These charts show the consumer prices for fresh fruit based on the Consumer Price Index. Notice there is a different base for each year. The first chart shows fresh fruit for a base year of 1982 through 1984, and the other chart has a base year of 1997. In August 2025, the Consumer Price Index for fresh fruits was 409.8, based on the 1982 through 84 base of 100. This was a 2% increase from the same time in 2024. This increase was caused by the high prices for apple and banana that increased by 14% and 19% respectively. The combined increase was 3 times higher than the 11% increase for citrus. In August 2025, the Consumer Price Index for apple, banana, and citrus were higher compared to August 2024, whereas the other fruits were unchanged. Although the Georgia peach industry was badly hit by freeze damage in 2023, production increased to 37,000 tons in 2024 and experienced another decline in 2025 by producing 30,000 tons, according to USDA. Although more than 90% of blueberry shipments took place between April and August, Georgia and Florida shipments were low. On the other hand, Georgia pecans were impacted by bad weather. All right, now we're going to move on to the green industry. And the 4 charts that we have up here, which I'll point out because they're impossible to read from there. The top left, we're looking at the total value for container nursery. The top right is the total value for greenhouse. The bottom left is value for field nursery, and the bottom right is the value for turf grass, and this is dating back over the last 25 years. Since 2020, which you recall is the pandemic, or kind of right before the pandemic, all sectors of the green industry have seen positive growth. Container nursery has stagnated since coming off the 2020 highs. Field nursery has seen some decline over the last couple of years. Greenhouse and turf grass have continued to trend upward, notably on strong housing demand. However, economic uncertainty, notably a slowing housing market, is cause for concern. Continued growth in the housing sector will fuel increased green industry growth, though increasing perceptions of a recession occurring will temper growth throughout 2026. All right, looking at timber. This graph shows the capacity for pulpwood for the South in the light blue bar and for Georgia in the dark blue bar. All right, the pine sawtimber prices are expected to stabilize but remain under pressure as housing starts continue to face headwinds. These include high construction costs, labor shortages, and tight housing affordability. On the bright side, high tariffs on Canadian softwood lumber imports help support demand for U.S. lumber and timber. Pine sawtimber prices are expected to firm in the Hurricane Helene affected areas of South Georgia due to local inventory shortages. Pulpwood prices in South Georgia continue to decline as the impacts of the recent mill closures show and salvage activities continue. Several state disaster relief incentive programs become available or get extended. All right, moving on to hospitality. So looking ahead, the forecast for hospitality and travel in 26 remains optimistic for rural stakeholders, despite broader economic pressures. So in 2024, rural lodging is expecting a rebound, with demand experiencing a rebound of 1.1% growth, reversing a decline from the previous year. A lot of that is event-driven growth. Modest growth is expected overall in 2026, boosted by events like the FIFA World Cup, but rural stays specifically are predicted to remain strong alongside the international influx of people attending the World Cup. Looking at nature preference, there's still a preference to be out in nature, an excellent thing for rural areas. It underscores a continued traveler preference to be in less crowded areas and nature-based destinations. And that's certainly a characteristic for Georgia agritourism and our rural areas. All right, as far as Georgia agritourism is concerned, it represents a growing opportunity for Georgia's ag sector, combining farm operations with tourism experiences to diversify income streams and strengthen rural economies. A recent National Agritourism Product Survey provides the snapshot of how of how producers view the opportunities, challenges, and future direction of agritourism. The most common agritourism activities provided include on-farm direct sales at 63%, educational activities at 55%, events and off-farm direct sales at 36% and 35% respectively. Those are followed by UPIC operations at 32%. Farmers engaged in agritourism face a range of challenges that limited growth and sustainability to their operations. The most pressing issues relate to limited access to financial capital, uncertainty and complexity in regulatory compliance, and inadequate physical infrastructure and destination amenities. Despite the challenges, the national survey emphasizes that agritourism producers feel optimistic about the future of the segment. Overall, 75% of operators feel the number of visitors to their operation would increase moderately or significantly over the next 5 years. 72% feel that way about their operations profitability, and 68% expect to diversify in terms of agritourism activities offered. The final category that we have is looking at direct-to-consumer sales in Georgia, insights from 2025 and outlook for 2026. Direct-to-consumer marketing strategies reflect the diverse needs and preferences of different generations of buyers, and that is needed. Younger generations of promoters tend to value a broad range of attributes and all of the above approach, whereas older generations place the greatest emphasis on freshness. The challenge and opportunity lies in enhancing their educational and entertainment dimensions to attract broader audiences, especially younger generations and new shoppers. For Georgia producers, this means leveraging those positive perceptions through marketing messages that emphasize sustainability, local economic impact, and community connection, while designing more engaging market experiences that would strengthen consumer engagement. They have several trends listed for 2026 and a lot of recommendations in the article that you can find online in the Georgia Ag Forecast publication. But some of these trends include hyper-local and regenerative sourcing, smart labeling or multi-labeling, functional benefits of fresh produce, so focusing on that health, taking advantage of the new food pyramid recommendations, digital engagement with personalized marketing and AI, engaging younger generations, and the final opportunity they see is waste reduction education. Any questions? Oh, yes, definitely check out the Georgia Ag Impact report that is posted online. You can snap a photo of it or open up the camera on your phone and follow the yellow link to check that out. And I think we've got a few minutes for questions between me and Ford before lunch.
Hey, Amanda. Oh. Thank you. I'm the turf guy. I'm the weird guy in the room, but you mentioned turf is equaling off, but at UGA, our varieties continue to increase 16 to 22% because of the changes in licensing that were made like 20 years ago. have you worked with our like USDA peanut breeders and UGA peanut breeders to maybe help them think through new licensing models or the blueberries or vegetables to like as things are tough right now in ag, is there a way we could do things different and you could help them think through different release processes to keep Georgia going forward?
I personally have not. I don't know. I'm sure someone in our college could definitely do that. I think it's a really great idea. Yeah, the research side.
So, Ryan, can you repeat the gist of your question?
Well, 20 years ago, we changed the way we released turf grasses, and in doing so, it wasn't very popular at the time, but we're still increasing 16 to 20% a year, even though turf is equaled off in general, like you showed there. But I was wondering for the future, are there different release models from USDA or UGA that aren't common now that could be studied by y'all to see how it could help us be profitable in Georgia in the future?
So Brian, I guess what I would say about that, and Harsha, if I need to be corrected, I guess you're the guy to do it. We've been staying with pretty much a stable way of doing it for the last several years, and I think it would be good for us to take a look at what other states are doing and to see if there are ways that we could capitalize on that that would benefit our producers of turf grass, which is a very important industry, as you well know, and I think we're very open to that as a college. Harsh, anything else to say to that?
Thank you, Dean Blake. Thank you for bringing that up, Brian. We are bound to work with Innovation Gateway in doing all marketing for our commodities, cultivars, and like that. We are looking at opportunities on how to improve our marketing and also sale of our cultivars and seed and all of that, not just in the US. We also need to look at international market as well, because some of the cultivars that we may not be using here, there may be opportunities outside as well. So yes, we are working with UGARF and Innovation Gateway to look at what else can we do. Those resources that we collect through the royalties go back into providing resources for our faculty, our plant breeders, to improve our operations and help with the plant breeding efforts. So thank you.
Thank you. Harsha mentioned UGARF, and that's the University of Georgia Research Foundation, in case you're wondering. Any other questions? Yeah. We got a mic coming to you.
Trying to figure out how to ask this. You look at Ford's slides about where Georgia's production strength is, and it starts with poultry. It's the strongest P we have. Well, poultry eats corn. And then when you look at the corn side and what our farmers are going through with our commodities, cotton is really causing some economic stress. Are y'all doing any studies to try to determine if you could plant more corn acres here? Because we have the irrigation infrastructure, we don't have the storage infrastructure. It seems to me like we could be doing a better job of linking, we as a state, we as farmers, linking the demand for corn right here under our nose with the opportunity to produce more. And I'm just curious from an economic standpoint if y'all looked at that.
Wait, hold on.
Here.
I haven't participated in anything, but I am aware of a study out of North Carolina, which is a little similar to us. The animal that eats the corn is different, but North Carolina is also a corn deficit state. And they had a study looking at profitability of on-farm storage. And I think that study showed that that was probably would be profitable, and that a lot of corn producers should be looking at adding on-farm storage. But that's the only thing I'm aware of.
And I was just going to add that it's dynamic. A lot of it, the people feeding the corn, they want it to be cheap. The people growing the corn don't want it to be cheap. So it's a delicate balance that you have to figure out. I do think that we're going to grow more corn next year. And then the issue that we're dealing with this year is storage. Like 93.5 million bushels for Georgia is a lot, a huge increase from previous years. And so we're going to plant more corn acres next year. I feel pretty strongly about that, but where are we going to put it all once we grow it? So I think Ford's point about looking at on-farm storage, trying to do an investment analysis and figure out if you can make it work given the prices. So the complicated thing is that as far as corn is concerned for Georgia, us still being a corn deficit state, that's good for growers in terms of pricing. But overall, the pricing is still impacted by what happens in the I states and how many acres they plant. And what their yields are. So it's really a complex question.
I think the other thing I would add to that question, very good question, comes back to something that Pete Gelber said when he was up here, and that is about potential to grow dairy production here in the state. We're in a milk deficit area, and so definitely we need to look at growing milk production here to really fill that need that we have all across the Southeast. All the other states, including Florida, are going down in production, but we have an opportunity to go up. There's also appetite amongst the current dairy producers we have to expand and grow operation. There also is some opportunity to bring in dairy operations from other states, such as Florida, that might be forced out. That also brings in additional need for using a lot of corn crop. There's a lot of corn that goes into the dairy side of things as well as poultry, as you mentioned. So I think that's another piece that we are talking to the dairy industry about. We've also had conversation with the corn growers in that regard as well as an opportunity for them. Yeah. Right.
I'm just looking, this is a sinking ship right now economically. We got to find something.
We do. We need to, the other piece that's been, maybe the commissioner, when he talks, he might talk about this. The other thing we've had a lot of conversation around is we grow a lot of commodities in this state. We're good at growing commodities, but most of them go out of the state for processing. Because of that, we miss a lot of that economic development opportunity with value-added products, niche products, and things such as that. And that is certainly something I think that we collectively need to take a look at, and how do we capture more of that food dollar and more of that dollar of processing those commodities here in the state. So hopefully he'll touch on that. We've had quite a bit of conversation in that area. All right, any last questions? All right, join me in thanking Amanda and Ford for what they presented. All right, before directions for lunch, I'm going to ask Tyrone Spearman if he would say our blessing here for lunch before we break.
May we bow our heads. Father, we come to you with thankful hearts today for the world of agriculture. Thank you for all the natural resources that we enjoy every day and that we get to set our career in. We pray that you will continue to bless each researcher here, each student, as we go out and tell the story of how we feed a hungry world. Thank you for this food, the farmers that produced it, the hands that prepared it, as we enjoy your beautiful kingdom. In Christ's name, amen.
So it's time for lunch, and we have a buffet line set up over there. But what I need you to do is go out these doors behind me and work your way around that corner, grab your lunch, and then come back in those doors that I'm pointing to over here to my right. So going out these doors, go through the buffet line, come back in 12:30 with Commissioner Harper. Is having an opportunity to hear from our Georgia Agriculture Commissioner, Tyler Harper. Tyler is a local farmer. As Senator Goodman likes to say, the thriller from Ocilla, right, Russ? And I think we have a tremendous partner there leading our Department of Agriculture here for the state of Georgia. I can tell you that he's been a great partner with our college, and I've seen him do some tremendous things during his term for agriculture here in the state. So please join me in welcoming our Commissioner of Agriculture, Tyler Harper.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon. It is good to be here, Dean. Place, thank you for first that introduction, but secondly, thank you for your friendship, your partnership. As we have discussed many, many times, you know, the working with you and the other colleges and universities, you are the research arm, we're the regulatory and the promotion arm at the Department of Agriculture, and I think that is a true marriage and partnership between us two, ensuring that we have the needed research for agriculture. We're educating our young men and women to be able to take on the new opportunities and jobs that we're working together to do, and we work to oversee it every day at the Department of Agriculture. So it truly is a partnership. So thank you for your work in that. I know I saw President Brundage earlier. I want to thank her for her partnership, but it truly is a partnership across our institutions and departments and agencies, and I just thank you for that. It is good to be here, good to be back at the Ag Forecast. It is, I guess, my fourth one now as Commissioner of Agriculture. Time flies. I guess it really flies when you're having fun, right? But it is a privilege to be here, to join you. Most importantly, it's a privilege to be in Tifton because that means I'm in South Georgia, which is much nicer, especially with this weather coming in right now. But it is truly an honor to be here just to share a few thoughts and some comments and some things that we have going at the department, kind of where agriculture is. I know that's what today is about. The Ag Forecast is an opportunity for us in the ag industry to gather together to have conversation about the current state of agriculture, where we're at and where we're going. I know you heard a lot of insight on that this morning from Senator Russ Goodman. I know he spoke, and I'm sure he gave y'all a lot of great Americanisms this earlier today. I have no doubt in that, but I'm glad he's here and was here to do that. I know Duncan Johnson was also here, our state FSA director. Duncan, thank you for your partnership. It truly has been a great opportunity to have you in the role that you're in and our work together for our farm families. So appreciate you and your insights and our continued partnership in that regard. But events like this where we gather together, we are working toward charting a path for our industry, charting a path forward. That's what events like this are about, to ensure that our agricultural communities across our state continue to thrive. But meetings like this today are especially important during trying times and challenging times. And that's unfortunately where we find ourselves in the state of the ag economy today. You know, I think with that, though, it bodes well that we have those partnerships like I mentioned. And I can't tell you enough how much I appreciate the partnerships we have at the Department of Agriculture with Russ as chairman of the Senate Ag Committee, with Robert Dickey as chairman of the House Ag Committee, our governor, Governor Brian Kemp, our leaders. We truly have a phenomenal set of leadership in our state, from our colleges and universities to our state leadership, and true partnerships, even on the federal level, that allow us to work together to address the challenges that are before us right now. And I think that's what's critical. And talking about challenges, I'm going to hit on this real briefly. We got some happening this weekend. With the winter weather coming in, I want you to be thinking about your friends and your families, especially in North Georgia. We have currently, the governor has declared a state of emergency as of late yesterday. Our team at the Department of Agriculture is part of that emergency response. We serve as the EF 711 lead in the State Operations Center. So our team, our emergency management team, has already been deployed to start in those efforts and working with other state agencies as we prepare for the response. But obviously at the department, we've been putting out messages of encouraging people to take care of their pets and their livestock, make sure that they have working water and are taking care of all of that and enough feed to work through this. We stand by to help with our sister agencies and our power company friends at Georgia Power and EMC to ensure that our farms and farm families stay operational. We know that power is a critical component of that, and with the possibility of losing power, it's going to be, could be some difficulties this weekend. But I will say all of that to say this. Y'all know this. I know that without a doubt that there will be 0 farms closing during the winter weather. Our farms and our farm families will be working through that to do what they do best in providing the food, the fiber, the shelter that we rely on every single day. And I'm thankful for our over 40,000 farm families in this state that go to work every single day that do just that. And as the Commissioner of Agriculture, it's an honor to serve on their behalf to ensure that we're working through this and leading this industry as they brave the cold. In addition to that, many of you have heard that we have a high path avian influenza event that the Department of Agriculture is currently managing in Walker County. That started last week. Our team has been on the ground managing that day in and day out. They have been braving the cold. We are going we're at a place where we're going to be able to suspend our operations to allow them to not have to be there during the winter weather storm, thank goodness. So we're going to be able to pull our team members out. But there's been a lot that's went into this. It's critical that we hit the ground running as quickly as possible to address that as quickly as possible. Because as you know, poultry is almost 37% of Georgia agriculture. It's a tremendous part of what we are, and it translates into the consumer and the grocery store. That if we're able to address those issues quickly and address them on the front end and ensure that it doesn't spread any further, we can ensure that we continue to protect the poultry industry. And that's part of the reason we've been working at the department to ensure that our agency is an emergency response agency, that we're prepared to respond to any emergency that happens. And that's part of the transition that we've been doing since I become commissioner and building out our emergency management team that focuses on that every single day. And our team does a phenomenal job in making that happen, in locking down those farms with our law enforcement unit to securing the facility and quarantining those farms that need to be quarantined in a quick period of time. Most of that's done in less than 12 hours. And I'm really proud of our team and the efforts that our team does in making that happen. I don't have to tell you this, though, in that regard. Y'all know agriculture is our #1 industry. That's why we're here, right? To celebrate that, #1, but also to talk about the role that agriculture plays in our life every single day. The 1 in 7 Georgians that are employed in this industry, the work that we do together to ensure that it's successful. But what I like to talk about agriculture as when I have conversations with folks is that agriculture is the bridge. Agriculture is the bridge. And the reason it's the bridge is because every Georgian every day is impacted by this industry, period. Agriculture is the bridge because it connects every Georgian across our state. It connects every community across our state. It connects every discipline across our state. It truly is that one thing that molds us and binds us all together as communities, as a state, as a nation. And that is why it's so critical that we allow this industry to succeed. I say it all the time that ag success is our nation's success. Nation that can't feed itself can't sustain itself. As goes agriculture, as goes America, as goes Georgia, as goes our communities. And it's critical that we work together to address the issues that we're facing and find solutions to those issues to ensure that it continues to be successful. But we didn't get here overnight. You know, this year we're celebrating the 250th anniversary of America. This July 4th, 1776 to July 4th, 2026. It's an amazing celebration in our nation's history. But to put it in perspective really quick, 250 years ago, when our nation was being born, it was farmers and planters and those individuals that took up arms to fight for our freedom. But at that same time, 90% of Americans were farmers. 90%. Today, 1.2% of Americans are farmers. And that is a significant issue for us because we've got a job to do to tell our story. Because the other parts of America that aren't actively involved in this industry every single day need to understand why agriculture is important to them. And so we've got a job to do. Y'all have heard me say this many times. I love quotes. One of my favorite is Thomas Jefferson's when he said that ag is our wisest pursuit. And he said that while they were in the workings of writing the U.S. Constitution at the time. It continues to be true today. Agriculture continues to be our wisest pursuit. But for us to do that, we've got to ensure that the people that are making the decisions understand that. You know, President Dwight Eisenhower said that farming's real easy when you're 1,000 miles away and your plow is a pencil. It is. When you're making decisions that impact farmers and farm families and the ag industry every single day, and you're 1,000 miles away from that field and your plow is a pencil, it is easy when you're making those decisions. So it's critical that the decision makers, those that are holding those pencils, know what it's like to hold a plow. That's the reason it's imperative that we tell our story. I tell farm families this all the time. I know a lot of them are a little afraid to get in front of groups and talk and have those conversations, but it is imperative that you tell your story. It is imperative that you let individuals know why it's important for us to work together for the betterment of your industry, of your farm, of your family, because that in and of itself will allow agriculture to continue to succeed. I know there's a lot of challenges we're facing. We've had a lot of timber mill closures over the last couple of months in our state. We had one of the most devastating storms that hit Georgia in Georgia history in Hurricane Helene about a year and a half ago. We continue to see declines in the retail dollar back to the family farm. Less than 5% of American farms are going to be profitable for a third year in a row. We continue to see increases in mental health challenges in our agricultural sector and ag industry. I know y'all know this, but with the study that was done between us and the University of Georgia and Mercer and others, we know that 40% of Georgia farmers have contemplated suicide in the last 12 months. Those are staggering statistics, and that's why we've been partnering together, again, partnerships, partnering together to address those issues to ensure that those farm families know that they have people that they can lean on. You know, we can do everything right in agriculture and lose it all in one night. And I think that's what makes it challenging for us in this industry sometimes. But that's the reason it's even more imperative that we come together to address those threats, whether it's a cotton jasset or the yellow-legged hornet or the spotted lanternfly or a hurricane or a tornado or whatever that challenge may be. It's imperative that we work together to address those issues. But there's other issues that we're seeing in the ag sector. In addition to all of that, we've had significant policy issues on the federal level that have impacted us. You know, impacted inflation. The increase in H-2A wage rate costs Georgia farmers $250 million over a 3-year period. Those are policy decisions and changes that significantly impacted our bottom line right here in Georgia. We've not held our counterparts around the globe accountable on trade policy. We have an unlevel playing field when it comes to American policy and ag policy around the globe, and we really are in a global economy when it comes to agriculture. We've not done a good job at holding them accountable. We've got work to do to ensure that American farmers have a level playing field when it comes to the global supply chain. Right now, we don't. Other things that we're seeing is just in the last 40 years, we have seen hundreds of seed companies become 3, basically. We've seen over 46 fertilizer manufacturers become 4. And over 50 to 80% of the market share belong to 2 equipment manufacturers today. Those are hard statistics to look at, but that has also contributed to a lot of the issues that we see. Seed costs have raised 18%, fuel costs 32%, electricity 36%, fertilizer 37%, labor 47%, and interest cost on agricultural operations 73% just in the last 4 years. Those are staggering statistics. At the same time, commodity prices have not kept up with that at all, as y'all know. So how do we ensure that agriculture continues to be successful? you know, with all of that, I still have confidence in who we are. And the reason I have confidence in who we are is because after Hurricane Helene, those in the agricultural industry showed us exactly who they are. And the way they did that is whenever their farm was completely destroyed, they had fences down, they might have had cows out, they still strapped up their boots and they got on their excavator and their bulldozer and their tractors and they cleared roads and highways and took care of their neighbors and ensured that their friends down the street were able to have access to clean water or food or whatever they needed. It's the heart of agriculture. It is truly that resilient spirit that our industry truly has. So it is critical that we work together to get them the resources in our industry, the policy need changes that we need to do to ensure that they're successful. And we're working to do that. Through Hurricane Helene, we've seen over $600 million already come to Georgia through traditional USDA programs. We're finalizing our block grant right now. That's over $531 million to come to Georgia to help our farm families get over this hump. Our team has invested hundreds of hours in this to ensure that we cover as much as possible, cover as many as possible, and we don't send one red cent back to Washington, D.C. That is critical. In addition to that, with the help of the General Assembly, we've invested over $300 million in low-interest loans and forestry cleanup grants in our farm families also. So when you add all of that together, we're at about $1.5 billion in response to Hurricane Helene for our farm families here in the great state of Georgia, and I'm proud of the work that our team has done working with the General Assembly and others to make that happen. But I also know that no relief package ever makes anybody whole, nor does it ever get everybody back on their feet. But that means we have more work to do to ensure that our farm families succeed through Farmer First policies that put our agricultural industry first. And I'm proud of some of the work that we've done in that regard by ensuring that hostile foreign nations and adversaries of the United States, thanks to the help of Russ Goodman and others, can't buy farmland in the state of Georgia anymore. We've created things like the Farmland Conservation Fund to protect Georgia farmland for generations to come. We've worked to ensure that we protect agriculture from other threats, from criminal threats. We've reinstated our law enforcement unit at the Department of Agriculture to directly go after those that want to use agriculture as a means to an end or want to take advantage of our farm families, and our law enforcement team's doing a phenomenal job in that regard. We've cut red tape and rolled back regulations at the Department of Agriculture to make it a fairer marketplace. But at the same time, as the dean said earlier, in Georgia, we grow almost 200 commodities. We send many of those commodities out of state. We send many of them out and we bring them back. We have tremendous opportunity in the state of Georgia for further production and value-added opportunities to ensure that our ag industry continues to succeed. With the dairy facility coming on in line in Valdosta, that is a perfect example of utilizing a resource that we have right here at home that we were sending to another state and bringing it back. We can continue to build on success like that to ensure that Georgia continues to be successful every single day. And I tell the governor and Pat Wilson at Economic Development this quite often, that Georgia's been the best state for business for over a decade now. We're proud of that. But it can't be the best state for business if the number one industry in the state isn't successful. And it can also continue to be the best state for business by utilizing the resources that we grow here. The timber industry is a perfect example, and we're working through those challenges now to find new innovation and new technology to bring online to help our friends in the timber industry to ensure that it continues to be successful. But we do that through partnerships also, through research and innovation at our colleges and raising up the next generation of ag leaders. We're able to ensure that we're finding those new ways to use what we do best here. I know it was mentioned earlier about poultry and corn. That is a perfect example of finding how can we ensure that we build out new storage capacity. We have opportunity for that. How do we ensure that we find those new ways to allow our industry to continue to succeed? In addition to that, we've got to continue to get over these humps that we find ourselves in. The Trump administration rolled out the farmer bridge payment just about a month ago. All of that should be rolling out by the end of next month, which is going to be a huge help to get our farm families across that hump till they can see the results of the One Big Beautiful Bill and the over $60 billion investment in agricultural commodity programs, the largest investment in almost 2 decades that we've seen in quite a long time, increased in reference prices and other changes that are significant. But right now, even though that is ongoing, we have not stopped those conversations. I'm honored to be a part of Secretary Rollins' kitchen cabinet. I'm one of 5 commissioners of agriculture across the country that is part of that team where we meet constantly to discuss the issues that are facing agriculture every single day. And we're in those constant conversations about how we can continue to allow this industry to succeed. And I know Congress is right now in conversation about an additional bridge program to allow agriculture to continue to address the issues that we're seeing in this industry. And we're going to continue to work with our congressional delegation and others, the Secretary and this administration, to ensure that they understand the issues that our farm families are facing and telling your story, their story, our story, because it's critical that they know what that is. In addition to that, in regards to H-2A, the Trump administration, obviously, as many of you know, has lowered that wage rate, which was a huge win for our farmers and our farm families, giving them an opportunity to recoup some of the cost that they incur every single day. And so we've done a lot, but there's still more to do. And I look forward to working with the General Assembly and others to ensure that we're focusing on those farmer-first policies that allow our industry to succeed. Closing out, I want to talk about what's, I guess, near and dear to me, and that is our team at the Department of Agriculture. We have almost 570 employees that go to work every single day in over 22 different divisions to execute the mission of ensuring that our farm families are successful, that ag businesses can have the resources they need to be successful, that we're marketing and promoting their crop, and at the same time we're protecting the food supply and the food supply chain. I'm proud of our team and the work that they do every single day. Many of them are sitting right here in front of me. Our Georgia Grown team does a phenomenal job in telling the story of Georgia agriculture. And we've been building out opportunities through that, whether it's traveling the globe or it's through new opportunities with, like the Atlanta Braves, where we have a Georgia Grown night at Truist Park, or it's the Georgia Grown Bowl with Georgia State and Georgia Southern, or it's new opportunities in bringing new companies to our state. And we've had some conversation about that just this week. I look forward to our continued work together as we continue to find ways to allow our industry to be successful. And our team at the Department of Agriculture is committed to doing just that, ensuring that all 11 million Georgians understand the role that agriculture plays in their life every single day. But as an agency, we've got to continue to have the resources we need to do our job. In the last 3 years, we've seen our licensing requests, or actually our licensed entities, increase by over 33%. In that same time period, we've only increased employment at the department by about 12%. That means we have an increased workload on our staff by about 15%. Those are things that we're working with the General Assembly to try to address, to ensure that we have the resources and agency to do our job. Quite simply put, the agency that oversees the #1 industry needs to be successful for the industry to be successful. And we're going to continue to tell that story with our friends in the General Assembly so they understand the work that we do is critically important every single day. And lastly, the Rural Center. We're really proud to have the Rural Center under our umbrella at the Department of Agriculture. It moved from the University System of Georgia to us this past fall, and we have completely integrated that now under our umbrella at the Department of Agriculture. This is going to ensure that we have a seat at the table when it comes to those economic development conversations, and ensure that we can be more engaged in things like workforce development and education and healthcare, because all of those are truly tied to our ag sector. Rural communities that depend on agriculture can't be successful if they don't have those key components that allows those communities to thrive. And at the Rural Center, working with our team at the department and our friends, or our team and employees and others in Georgia Grown, we're going to be able to do those things together. And I'm really proud about the work that they're doing. If you're at Jekyll Island, go by the Pier Road and go see the first ever Georgia Grown store. I want to encourage you to do that. We now have an online marketplace at georgiagrown.com where you can actually buy product online. We have 2 resource centers in our state, one in Metter now, one coming online in Albany very, very soon, to help continue to allow folks to build out their vision and their dream when it comes to an agricultural type business. So we're working every day to ensure that this industry is successful. Despite all the challenges, like I said, I'm pretty confident, because I know there's a lot of smart people in this room. And all of us working together, we can find solutions to the challenges that we face. You know, every day the American farmer is asked to do more with less. Put more peanuts under the dirt, and researchers to that extent, more cotton in a bowl, more corn on a stalk, more pork on the side, more lamb on a chop, more beef on the hoof, and whatever else I forgot. But the farmer's asked to do that every day, and we're asked to do that with less seed, less water, less fertilizer, less pesticides, less land. We can't answer that challenge without partnerships and without our work together. So to our researchers and our scientists, to our extension agents, to our entities like USDA and others that work together, thank you for the partnerships that we have to allow the Georgia and the American farmer to be successful. Because it truly is that partnership that is going to allow us to address those challenges that we face every single day. America's success is ag success. Ag success is America's success. You can't have one without the other, period. It's national security. I'm a FFA kid, 4-H kid. My favorite paragraph of the FFA Creed is the last one. It says that I believe that American agriculture can and will hold true to the best traditions of our national life, and that I can exert an influence in my home and community, which will stand solid for my part in that inspiring task. That last paragraph basically says that we all have a part to play in ensuring that agriculture is successful every single day. I look forward to our part at the department, my role as the commissioner, and our partnerships together to do just that. Thank you for what you do for Georgia agriculture. Thank you for what you mean to our state. God bless you in your work every single day. God bless the Georgia farmer, the American farmer. Good to be with y'all. Y'all keep plowing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Harper. That was a great closing to our 2026 Ag Forecast meeting. And again, really appreciate your partnership, Commissioner Harper, in regards to all that we do together. I hope this has been a very informative time for you, and hopefully you've learned a number of things, and hopefully it's also been meaningful to you. I do want to again thank our sponsors, the CAS Alumni Association, the Georgia Department of Agriculture and Georgia Grown, Farm Credit Associations of Georgia, Corteva Agriscience, and also our presenting sponsor, Massey Ferguson. You will note on your tables there's some flower arrangements there. I would like for you to take those with you. We don't have use for all of those, so figure out who's going to get those at your tables, but please take those with you. Thank you again for being here today. Thank you for your support of Georgia agriculture, and we'll see you next year when we're back here in 2027. Thank you very much.